It was a quiet night, the garage humming softly with strange inventions, and shadows moving just a little on their own. Morty felt that the world was whispering secrets. Secrets only the stars could understand. We want you to know something important. We truly love and care about you. Before we begin the story, tell us where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now grab your coffee, and let's get started. Tonight, we'll drift through whispers, stars, and small moments only Morty, and maybe even Rick, could notice. The garage was quiet in a way that almost felt sacred. The usual clutter of tools and half-finished inventions sat in dim, scattered pools of light, as though the walls themselves had learned to hush. Morty leaned against a workbench, his elbows propped, listening to Rick move about the space with the careful rhythm of someone performing an old ritual. The faint hum of a machine, soft and uneven, filled the air, vibrating gently against Morty's chest. It was the kind of sound that made you feel both very small and very important at the same time, as if the world had just leaned closer and whispered a secret meant only for you. Rick didn't notice Morty at first. He fiddled with wires that gleamed like tiny rivers under the dim bulbs, adjusting something that might have been a portal or might have been nothing at all. Morty had long since learned not to ask too many questions. The answers were often too strange to make sense, and sometimes they made him feel like the edges of reality were far softer than he had ever imagined. Still, he stayed, because there was a warmth in simply being near Rick during these quiet nights. A sense of continuity, of being seen even when the universe itself seemed indifferent. The shadows in the corners of the garage moved just a little, as if they had their own awareness. Morty blinked and swore he saw a small, unplaceable figure flit behind a shelf, only to vanish when he looked directly. His heart did a quiet skip, not with fear, but with that peculiar tingle of wonder that comes from realizing something exists just outside the edge of understanding. He wondered if Rick could see it too, or if he had grown so accustomed to the strangeness of the universe that he simply didn't notice these subtle dances any more. Rick hummed softly, almost like a lullaby, a tone that carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. Morty realized that he had always loved this sound. It reminded him of the rare moments when Rick's attention softened and the sharp edges of his sarcasm dulled, leaving behind a faint trace of care. It was the sort of care that didn't announce itself with words, that didn't clamor for recognition. It just existed, quietly, like a candle burning somewhere far off in the dark. Morty smiled a little to himself, letting the warmth seep in. The air smelled faintly of burnt metal and peanut butter, a combination so absurd that it felt like a signature of their home, a scent that carried memories rather than logic. Morty thought about all the nights he had spent here, listening, waiting, learning to notice the small things that mattered. The flicker of a light, the almost imperceptible sigh when a machine worked just right, the way Rick would sometimes mutter nonsense under his breath that, if Morty listened closely, felt almost like advice. He didn't always understand what Rick meant, but he understood that there was a rhythm to it, a kind of quiet storytelling happening in the pauses between words. A faint creak echoed somewhere in the garage, and Morty realized he was holding his breath. There was no danger, at least not the kind that had teeth or claws. This was the danger of possibility, the subtle uncertainty that made the universe feel alive. And in that moment, Morty felt something he rarely allowed himself to feel so clearly, a sense of belonging, anchored not in safety, but in shared curiosity. Here, in this space between the ordinary and the strange, he was part of something larger, something tender, even if he couldn't yet name it. Rick set down a small device, metallic and humming softly. He straightened and rubbed his hands together, then glanced at Morty with a look that was fleeting, almost invisible, but full of recognition. "You're awake," he said simply, and there was no mockery in his voice. It was an acknowledgement, the kind that settles deep in your chest. Morty nodded, unsure what to say, because sometimes words would only get in the way of understanding what needed to be felt. They sat there together, two figures amid the quiet chaos of invention and memory, connected without ceremony. Outside the garage window, the stars were faint but steady, blinking softly in the vastness above. Morty watched them for a moment, imagining that each star carried a story, a small whisper of some other life, another world. It felt comforting to think that even in the endless expanse of the universe, there was some thread tying all these moments together. And perhaps that was what the night in the garage was. A thread, a tiny, luminous tether, connecting Morty to Rick, to the strange universe, and to himself. The hum of the machines became a lullaby, a rhythm that coaxed his thoughts into softness. Morty thought about how strange it was that the most ordinary objects, the workbenches, the tools, the forgotten inventions, could hold so much memory. Every scratch, every scorch mark, every wire was like a page from a book written in invisible ink. And perhaps that was the magic here, not in the grand gestures or the dangerous adventures, but in noticing the details that nobody else bothered to see. He realized that this was the beginning of his own kind of understanding, one built not on grand heroics, but on observation, reflection, and quiet presence. The night deepened, and Morty felt his eyelids grow heavy. The garage seemed to fold in on itself gently, cradling him, the hum of machines blending with the distant rhythm of Rick's tinkering. Somewhere, a shadow shifted again, barely perceptible, and Morty let himself imagine that it was a guardian of this quiet space, a small friend of the night who existed only for moments like this. He smiled in the dim light, feeling the pull of sleep, the soft embrace of a universe that could be both strange and tender at the same time. Rick leaned back in his chair, stretching in a way that seemed almost human, almost tender, as though the weight of infinite adventures could be paused for just a breath. Morty closed his eyes, letting the quiet soak in, letting himself drift toward the gentle, steady rhythm of being alive in a world that was both unpredictable and strangely safe. The hum of machines, the faint scent of peanut butter, the stars blinking far above all, it settled into a soft pattern, like a lullaby for those awake enough to notice. And there, in the garage filled with shadows, whispers, and soft lights, Morty realized that this was the kind of night that mattered, not because anything dramatic happened, but because it existed, because it allowed him to breathe, to feel, to belong in the hush between chaos and comprehension. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or what adventures waited just outside the walls of the garage, but he knew that, for now, in this moment, he was home, and somewhere, Rick's hum became a whisper, a lullaby that carried Morty into dreams, and perhaps into understanding. The living room felt unusually still that evening, as though it had held its breath, waiting for something to happen that no one could name. Morty wandered in slowly, brushing a hand along the back of the sofa, feeling the faint impressions of long-forgotten afternoon scratches from playful arguments, indentations from pillows that had once held laughter. The faint smell of old carpet and faint citrus cleaner mingled, a scent that seemed to exist between memory and reality. Somewhere in the corners of the room, shadows shifted quietly, not threatening, just present, like thoughts that you almost forget to think. On the wall hung the family portrait, slightly crooked, the frame polished just enough to catch the light in a soft shimmer. Morty stared at it, seeing not only faces, but echoes of all the moments they had lived together, small victories, quiet disappointments, and the kind of laughter that left your chest warm long after it ended. The portrait seemed to breathe slightly in the corner of his eye, as though the painted figures remembered things that he did not, small details he would only notice if he truly looked. It was strange and comforting all at once, a reminder that the past could live quietly with you, even when you were busy living the present. Rick appeared behind him, carrying a small tool that rattled faintly in his pocket. He glanced at the portrait, and for a brief moment, his eyes softened. Morty had seen it before, a rare expression, fleeting like a comet passing through a night sky, so subtle you almost missed it, but unmistakably real. Rick said nothing, just adjusted a tiny screw on a nearby contraption that hummed softly, and the moment passed. Morty, however, lingered on it, holding on to that fragment of tenderness like a fragile star. The shadows in the room seemed to respond to Morty's attention. They stretched along the walls and curled around furniture in ways that made the room feel both familiar and surreal. Morty realized that the shadows were more than simple absence of light. They carried traces of memory, hints of emotion, and fragments of moments that hadn't yet faded. The small motions of the living room, the gentle creak of a floorboard, the almost inaudible hum of the refrigerator mixed with the shadows, creating a symphony of quiet existence that was almost hypnotic. He thought about all the times family gatherings had been loud and chaotic, full of noise and demands, yet somehow this quiet, reflective moment felt more complete. Here, in the stillness, he could notice the relationships, the subtleties of connection that often went unseen in the chaos of daily life. He noticed the faint line of worry on Beth's forehead in the portrait, the playful gleam in Summer's eyes, the curiosity forever etched on Morty's own face. And though Jerry's smile seemed awkward in the frame, it held a warmth that was undeniable, like sunlight diffused through thin clouds. Morty's thoughts wandered gently, moving like small clouds drifting across a vast, calm sky. He imagined the family together in different moments, not as the fractured, comic versions that often dominated their lives, but as a tapestry of quiet attention, of small acts of kindness that had gone unnoticed. A hand placed over another's in comfort, a joke that made someone smile despite fatigue, a patient explanation repeated for the 1,000th time. These small threads, Morty realized, were what truly held them together. He remembered the whispers of past adventures, fleeting moments that seemed almost invisible but left traces in his chest. He remembered how Rick had once quietly fixed something for him without asking for thanks, how Beth had lingered a moment too long to make sure he was all right, how Summer had shared a look that said she understood without speaking. Even Jerry, in his awkward way, had moments of care that mattered more than anyone acknowledged. Morty realized that these moments, small as they were the true architecture of family. Outside, the sky was beginning to darken, clouds rolling gently across a universe that seemed infinite and patient. Morty imagined that each cloud carried fragments of memory, floating from house to house, linking lives and moments in ways unseen but deeply felt. And perhaps that was why the shadows in the room moved the way they did, not to frighten, but to remind him that every memory, every act of care, every smile or sigh had its place, even if it went unnoticed. Rick hummed again, softly, from the kitchen. The sound was familiar, like a thread stitching the present to the past, connecting Morty to the night, to the shadows, to the small miracles of ordinary life. Morty leaned against the sofa and closed his eyes briefly, letting the hum, the sense, and the shadows envelop him. For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist, the chaos, the aliens, the infinite crisis, and there was only this quiet room, this gentle space between breath and thought, between memory and dream. A small creak of the floorboard brought Morty's attention back to the family portrait. He noticed a detail he hadn't before, a small, almost invisible mark on Rick's painted hand, like the faintest signature of something left behind. Morty didn't know what it meant exactly, but it felt like a reminder of continuity, of presence, of the quiet threads that connected moments and people. He smiled softly, understanding that even if things changed, even if chaos eventually returned, the weight of care and connection lingered. The shadows began to lengthen as night deepened, curling around the edges of furniture and pooling in corners. Morty felt them as gentle companions, like friends who did not speak, but understood everything. He imagined the family moving softly through the room, their footsteps light, their laughter muted but present, weaving the night into a quiet story that only he could witness. The room seemed to pulse with memory, with whispers of what had been and what might still be. Morty's eyes grew heavy, and he realized that the stillness of the living room had lulled him toward that fragile edge between wakefulness and sleep. The shadows moved gently, the portrait glimmered faintly in the dim light, and the soft hum of Rick's presence wrapped around him like a blanket. The room itself seemed to breathe in quiet, measured rhythms, and Morty let himself float along with it. There was no rush, no urgency, only a universe holding him softly, tenderly, in the quiet embrace of ordinary magic. And as he drifted, Morty thought that perhaps these were the nights that mattered most. Not the adventures, the crises, or the danger, but the simple, reflective moments that reminded him of love, memory, and the invisible threads that tied him to those he cared for. Shadows on the wall, whispers in the air, the faint hum of machines, they were all part of a lullaby, a gentle song that carried him closer to dreams. Outside, the clouds rolled slowly across the starry sky, carrying fragments of memory, whispers of past laughter, and tiny flickers of hope. Morty felt the weight of the universe settle softly against him, and he allowed himself to breathe, to rest, to belong in this moment, even amidst the strangeness of it all. Somewhere, Rick continued to tinker, the faint hum a constant companion, and Morty let the quiet, reflective night draw him deeper into the gentle, dreamlike rhythm of existence. Morty had always been aware that the universe was vast, too vast to ever fully understand. But that night, in the quiet corners of the Smith house, he felt the presence of something small, gentle, and inexplicably alive. It was the kind of presence that existed in the space between moments, never fully seen, never fully explained, yet undeniably real. He first noticed it as a flicker in the corner of his vision, a tiny movement that seemed almost like a shadow, yet carried a soft, comforting warmth. He blinked, convinced he had imagined it. Yet when he looked again, it was still there, just at the edge of perception. Not frightening, not intrusive, just there, like a quiet companion who had decided to accompany him through the night. Morty's chest felt lighter, though he didn't understand why. In a house usually dominated by chaos, bizarre inventions, and endless crises, this small, unseen friend felt like a rare thread of calm, a reminder that even in a world brimming with uncertainty, there could be quiet moments of care. Rick, as usual, was preoccupied. The soft whir of a machine in the garage filtered through the walls, blending with the subtle creak of floorboards and the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Morty moved slowly, careful not to disturb the strange energy in the room. He felt, somehow, that the presence was tied to him alone, responding to the rhythm of his heartbeat, the small flutters of attention he gave to the quiet corners of life. He remembered how, as a child, he had always longed for someone who understood him without explanation. The unseen friend seemed to be that wish made tangible, a companion who didn't speak, didn't judge, but simply existed alongside him. Morty reached toward the corner, half expecting his hand to pass through air, and yet it felt warm, or maybe just hopeful, like the memory of a long-lost smile. He laughed softly, almost whispering to the emptiness, "I see you." The air in the living room shifted gently, not with magic or danger, but with attention. Morty thought about how often the world overlooked small details, small lives, and small gestures. And here, in this fleeting moment, he realized that noticing the act of paying attention, truly seeing, was a kind of quiet power. The unseen friend, whatever it was, existed because he acknowledged it. And in return, it offered something tender, companionship without words, connection without expectation, a quiet reassurance that he was not alone. Rick entered the room then, carrying a tray with a half-finished invention and a mug of something steaming. Morty felt the unseen friend shrink slightly, hiding in the corners, aware that Rick's presence might disrupt the fragile balance of quiet. But Rick did not notice it, of course. He never did. His eyes flicked over Morty, the machines, the faintly glowing shadows of the room, and he muttered something about calibration and quantum resonance. Morty smiled softly, sensing that the invisible companion was still there, patiently waiting for attention to return. The family was absent at that moment, scattered across the multiverse in ways both literal and figurative. Yet Morty felt that the unseen friend was connected to them all, somehow, not in the chaotic way of adventures and crisis, but in the quiet, reflective space that carried memory and care. It was as if the friend existed in the moments between laughter and frustration, between Rick's cynicism and his rare tenderness, between Morty's fears and his small, persistent courage. Morty wandered toward the kitchen, imagining that every corner of the house held similar presences, tiny echoes of love and care that usually went unnoticed. Perhaps they were the memories of adventures past, or the reflections of moments no one thought mattered. Perhaps they were fragments of universes he would never visit, reminders that the vastness of existence carried quiet guardians who existed not for heroics, but for small comforts. The idea made his chest feel full, a gentle kind of awe that didn't demand excitement, only presence. He thought of times when Rick had quietly done something that mattered without making a show of it, a repair, a soft glance, a word he barely heard. The unseen friend seemed to echo those gestures, existing in the same subtle, unnoticed spaces where real care often hides. Morty realized that companionship, in its purest form, often went unnoticed by the world, but it was no less powerful for it. Outside, the night deepened, and the hum of distant stars seemed to pulse in rhythm with the garage machines. Morty leaned against the counter, feeling the unseen friend linger near, warm and unthreatening. He wondered if perhaps everyone had such presences, invisible companions that moved quietly alongside them, waiting for acknowledgement. And perhaps the greatest gift one could give was simply attention, a small act of noticing, a gentle recognition of existence in its softest forms. The shadows in the palms, corners of the kitchen seemed to stretch toward him, bending in ways that suggested curiosity rather than menace. Morty imagined that the unseen friend could slip through walls, float across hallways, and watch over the family in ways that no one else could perceive. And yet it waited for him, patient and silent, a tether to the quiet parts of life that were often overlooked amidst chaos. He smiled faintly, realizing that this night, like so many nights before, was not about grand adventures or spectacular discoveries. It was about noticing the subtle hum of life, the soft edges of memory, the threads of care and presence that bound people together. The unseen friend embodied all of that, a small, ephemeral reminder that the world could hold wonder even when it seemed ordinary. Rick hummed again from the garage, a familiar grounding sound. Morty closed his eyes briefly, letting the gentle vibrations mingle with the warmth of the unseen companion. For the first time that evening, he allowed himself to lean fully into the quiet, to feel the soft pulse of connection, and to understand that even in a house filled with paradoxes, alien visitors, and chaotic inventions, there could exist moments of pure, unspoken companionship. And as he drifted toward sleep, Morty imagined that the unseen friend curled around him like a small, protective shadow, a presence that existed simply because he had opened his heart to it. In the silence of the Smith house, amid hums, whispers, and the faint glow of machines, he felt understood. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough to carry him gently into dreams. And somewhere in that quiet night, Morty knew that small, unseen threads of care, memory, and companionship were everywhere, waiting to be noticed. The garage hummed softly, a quiet symphony of gadgets and wires, each note barely perceptible, yet strangely comforting. Morty leaned against the edge of a workbench, listening as Rick moved among his inventions with deliberate care. It was not the usual clatter or chaotic energy of their adventures, but something slower, meditative, like a lullaby carried across the universe. Each whir, click, and soft hum vibrated against the walls and Morty's chest alike, weaving a pattern of calm that he felt more than he heard. Morty watched Rick's hands, the way they moved with careful precision, turning knobs, adjusting tiny circuits, and occasionally pausing to tap a strange rhythm. There was a poetry to it, subtle and unspoken, the kind of rhythm that only someone who had lived amidst infinite chaos could appreciate. Morty felt himself breathing in time with the machines, letting their quiet pulse settle over him like a warm blanket. Somehow, in that soft, repetitive motion, he understood that these were more than just inventions. They were lullabies, each one a song composed to soothe, to hold, to anchor moments in a universe that otherwise refused to stop moving. Rick muttered quietly under his breath, words that Morty could not entirely understand. But they did not matter. They were not instructions or warnings, but gentle cadences, small murmurs that carried the weight of experience and perhaps, just perhaps, a rare kind of care. Morty felt a shift within himself, a gentle awareness that he had been part of this rhythm all along, even in moments when he had thought himself unworthy or unnoticed. In the hum of the machines, in the small gestures of Rick's hands, there was an echo of trust, a quiet invitation to simply exist alongside it all. He thought of the unseen friend from the night before, that small presence that had hovered on the edges of his perception, quiet and patient. Tonight it felt different, as though the lullabies themselves had drawn it closer, guiding it gently toward him. Morty could sense it in the way shadows moved in the corners, bending around the machines and the faint glows of blinking lights. He smiled softly, feeling the gentle reassurance of companionship that needed no form, no voice, no explanation, just quiet existence shared between him and something infinite and unseen. Outside the garage window, the stars shimmered faintly, distant and steady. Morty imagined that each one carried a fragment of a lullaby, a note in the symphony of the multiverse. Perhaps every world, every life, every consciousness had its own quiet song, barely perceptible to anyone not paying attention. Morty thought that maybe this was what made life beautiful, the soft persistence of order, rhythm, and care hidden beneath the apparent chaos. The universe was not loud, not threatening, but patient, and these lullabies were proof of its gentle constancy. Rick shifted slightly, glancing toward Morty with an almost imperceptible acknowledgement. There was no need for words. This was a language of presence, of rhythm and attention. Morty realized that the lullabies were as much about connection as they were about the machines themselves. Each soft hum and click was a way of reaching across silence, a small thread tying him to Rick, to the unseen friend, to the quiet corners of existence where meaning often hid. Morty felt warmth fill his chest, a soft glow of belonging that he had not noticed before. The lights of the garage flickered slightly as if responding to the rhythm of thought, or perhaps the rhythm of intention. Morty closed his eyes briefly and let himself float on the cadence of the machines, the murmurs of Rick, and the subtle movements of shadows. He imagined that the lullabies were wrapping the house in a gentle embrace, tucking every corner, every memory, every quiet concern into a cocoon of calm. For once, the universe felt like it had paused, offering him a moment of reflection rather than adventure, of observation rather than reaction. He remembered past nights, long after chaotic adventures had left him trembling or exhausted, when he had lain awake, listening to the soft, strange noises of the multiverse. Each hum, each crackle, each tiny click was a memory, a story, a reassurance that life persisted in quiet, meaningful ways. Now, with Rick humming and the machines weaving their soft song, Morty understood that these moments were a kind of magic, subtle, invisible, deeply rooted in attention and care. And it was a magic that needed no dramatic gestures, no crises, no explosions. Morty opened his eyes and looked around, noticing small details he had never paid attention to before. The gentle sway of a wire, the glimmer of a tiny screen, the soft reflection of light on the polished metal of a tool. Everything seemed alive with quiet purpose, like the house itself had decided to join in the lullaby. Even the faint hum of the refrigerator had become part of the symphony, a background note in a song composed over countless nights of tinkering and observing. Morty felt a profound sense of gratitude for the quiet, for Rick's rare moments of softness, for the unseen friend, and for the fact that he could notice it all. Rick leaned back in his chair, stretching in the way he always did after long hours of work. There was no urgency, no sharpness in his gaze. He hummed again, and the rhythm of the garage seemed to deepen, folding around Morty and the unseen presence like a soft cloak. Morty's breathing slowed, his muscles loosened, and the world outside, with all its infinite chaos and possibility, seemed to pause, if only for a few moments. He felt the lullabies of the multiverse settling into him, filling the spaces where worry and fear had lingered, leaving only the calm pulse of being. The night stretched gently, and Morty felt himself pulled closer to sleep, cradled by the harmony of machines, shadows, and whispers. He realized that lullabies were not only songs, they were presence, attention, and care made audible. They carried a quiet reminder that he was not alone, that he was seen, that his life, small and fragile as it sometimes felt, mattered in the vast expanse of time and space. Morty allowed the soft vibrations of the hums and clicks to wash over him, letting each one soothe, steady, and settle him into a gentle peace dot as he drifted toward dreams. Morty imagined himself floating through soft, glowing threads of light that linked him to Rick, to the house, to the universe itself. He felt the unseen friend nearby, a warm, patient presence, and understood that these quiet connections, rather than grand adventures or dramatic heroics, were the true heartbeat of life. And in that gentle, meditative moment, Morty felt fully, completely, profoundly alive, not in excitement, but in reflection, care, and quiet wonder. The sky above the Smith house stretched wide and calm, painted in soft shades of twilight, and the clouds drifted lazily as though time itself had slowed to watch. Morty sat on the porch, legs dangling over the edge, and traced patterns in the fading light, noticing how the clouds moved with quiet rhythm, unhurried and patient. It was as if the universe had decided to pause, just for him, just for this evening, letting him witness the gentle dance of ordinary beauty in a house, often crowded by extraordinary chaos. Inside, Rick's hum echoed faintly through the walls, mixing with the soft creak of the porch boards beneath Morty's weight. Morty had always been attuned to these small, almost imperceptible signals, the subtle vibrations of life that often went unnoticed in the rush of adventures. And tonight, each sound, each movement, each whisper of air felt deliberate, as though the house itself was alive, breathing with the same measured calm as the clouds above. Morty leaned back, watching the silhouettes of the trees bend gently in the evening breeze. The clouds moved slowly, their edges blurred like memories just beyond reach. He imagined that each one carried fragments of stories, laughter from past family dinners, whispered arguments that had long since resolved, small gestures of care that had been forgotten in the rush of days. And yet, those clouds held them all, drifting across the vast sky, carrying a gentle reminder that moments, no matter how small, left traces that lingered softly. Invisibly, Rick appeared at the doorway, holding a steaming mug. He didn't ask why Morty was out here. He simply offered the mug, a quiet acknowledgement of presence rather than a demand for explanation. Morty accepted it, feeling the warmth seep into his hands and chest. There was comfort in the simplicity of the gesture, the unspoken reassurance that even in a world filled with infinite possibilities and chaotic adventures, these small acts mattered. The clouds shifted again, slow and deliberate, casting fleeting shadows over the house. Morty noticed patterns forming in their shapes, subtle and abstract. A curve that reminded him of a smile, a soft arch that felt like an embrace, a fleeting streak that seemed almost like a finger pointing to the stars above. He imagined that the clouds were a language of their own, gentle and secretive, sharing quiet stories with anyone willing to pause and notice. And in that quiet contemplation, Morty felt an intimacy with the universe he had rarely experienced, a sense of being seen, even by something so immense and indifferent. Rick hummed softly, a tune that blended with the rhythm of the clouds, the sway of the trees, and the distant call of evening birds. Morty realized that these tunes, like the clouds, were more than background noise. They were lullabies, threads weaving him into the fabric of the house, the evening, and the sky. He took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill his lungs, and imagined the clouds carrying pieces of his own thoughts, floating them gently across the multiverse, dispersing them softly into infinity. Morty remembered earlier nights when the clouds had seemed ordinary, static, uninspiring. But now, in the reflective quiet of this evening, they felt alive, aware, and filled with quiet wisdom. They mirrored his own thoughts, bending and stretching in ways that reminded him that even when life seemed repetitive or overwhelming, there was rhythm, there was flow, and there was room to notice the subtle beauty in small, fleeting moments. He thought of the unseen friend that had hovered around him, the gentle presence that lingered in quiet corners. Perhaps it had joined the clouds tonight, drifting above the Smith house in a soft, imperceptible glow. Morty imagined it moving between shadows and light, a silent companion woven into the fabric of this calm, reflective evening. He smiled, feeling the warmth of connection, not dependent on words or form, but on the quiet attention that bound him to both friend and universe. Rick leaned against the railing beside him, sipping from his mug. Morty felt a rare sense of calm between them, unspoken but palpable. The hum of the garage faded into the background, replaced by the natural cadence of the night, the wind, the shifting clouds, the occasional creak of the house settling into itself. Morty realized that this quiet presence Rick nearby, the unseen friend, the clouds above, was a lullaby all its own, a soft orchestration that reminded him life was more than chaos and adventure. It was also reflection, observation, and tender awareness that the clouds continued to move, slow and deliberate, forming shapes Morty could almost name, but never quite could. A circle that seemed like a memory he had forgotten, a streak that resembled a faint smile he once received, a shadow that whispered of someone he loved without fully understanding why. The sky, the clouds, the fading light all became a gentle reminder of impermanence and continuity, of the delicate threads connecting past, present, and future in ways too subtle to always notice. Morty closed his eyes briefly, letting the rhythm of the clouds, the soft warmth of Rick's presence, and the lingering hum of the unseen friend carry him deeper into calm. He imagined drifting, floating just above the house, carried by the soft currents of air and memory, noticing the way every shadow, every flicker of light, every soft sound existed in harmony with everything else. The universe, in its quiet way, was not chaotic. It was patient. It was alive, and it held him gently, tenderly, in a rhythm too subtle for most to perceive. He thought of family, of love, of the unspoken bonds that had been built quietly over countless days and nights. Each cloud seemed to carry a fragment of that care, a note of tenderness, a soft reflection of moments that mattered in ways too small to measure. Morty felt the weight of gratitude, of awe, of quiet wonder. As he let himself exist fully in the gentle embrace of the evening, the stars began to appear, faint at first, then more steadily, each one a distant, soft point of light, complementing the moving clouds above. Morty felt the gentle pulse of the multiverse in their glow, and the clouds seemed to dance around them, weaving a lullaby that only he and the house could hear. He allowed himself to breathe deeply, sinking further into the quiet, reflective space that this evening had created, letting every sound, shadow, and soft shimmer guide him toward calm dot. And as the night wrapped around the Smith house, Morty understood that some moments mattered not for what happened, but for what was felt. The clouds, the soft hums, the gentle presence of Rick and the unseen friend, they were all lullabies of their own, songs composed in quiet awareness. Morty closed his eyes fully, letting the gentle night carry him, allowing himself to drift into reflection, into calm, into the soft, patient rhythm of the universe. Morty had never thought much about sandwiches, not really. They were simple, ordinary things, usually consumed quickly between adventures, or while rushing to keep up with Rick's ever-changing plans. But today, something was different. On the kitchen counter, a sandwich sat quietly, untouched, as if it were waiting for him to notice, not in the usual hurried way, but with a presence that felt deliberate, almost sentient. He leaned closer, tilting his head, and something odd happened. A faint warmth seemed to radiate from it, subtle and comforting. Morty blinked. He was sure he had seen sandwiches before, but he had never noticed this one. It seemed aware. Not dangerous, not frightening, but observant, almost like it remembered moments that he himself had forgotten. He reached for it slowly, as if disturbing it too abruptly might break the quiet magic of the kitchen, and took a small bite. The taste was ordinary, yet it carried with it faint echoes of memory. Morty closed his eyes, and for a moment the world shifted subtly. He remembered other breakfasts, other hurried meals, laughter shared over the clatter of plates, moments of quiet reflection in the chaos of their unusual lives. Each memory surfaced softly, as if the sandwich had gently collected them, storing fragments of their shared existence, and now returned them to him in small, edible pieces. Rick appeared behind him, humming softly, the faint rhythm of his presence blending with the ordinary sounds of the kitchen. Morty felt a small smile tug his lips. Rick, this sandwich, it's kinda weird," he said quietly. Rick's eyes flicked toward the counter, not in surprise, but with a faint, knowing glimmer. "Ah," he said, voice low and reflective, "sometimes things remember more than we do. Maybe it's the universe's way of nudging you to notice." Morty laughed softly, unsure if Rick was joking or serious. Somehow, it didn't matter. The sandwich, the kitchen, the quiet hum of machines somewhere in the house, it all felt connected. Every bite, every fragment of memory recalled, was a gentle thread tying him to the people he loved, the moments he had shared, and the subtle truths of their chaotic but meaningful lives. He realized, with a faint warmth in his chest, that even ordinary objects could hold tenderness if he simply paused to notice. The shadows of the kitchen shifted slightly, as if acknowledging the moment. Morty imagined that the sandwich had its own consciousness, a quiet companion in its own right, observing the rhythms of the household, storing echoes of laughter and whispered conversations. Perhaps it remembered the small, unseen acts of care that passed between family members, the gestures that went unnoticed, the soft murmurs of affection that rarely reached the ears of anyone but him. Morty set the sandwich down and gazed out the window. The clouds were drifting slowly across the twilight sky, and he felt the gentle pulse of the universe in their movement. It occurred to him that life, like this sandwich, held memories that often went unnoticed. Objects, moments, even silences could store fragments of care and attention, quietly reminding him of continuity, presence, and the gentle persistence of love. He smiled, realizing that noticing such things was a gift he could give himself. Rick hummed again, a soft undertone that merged seamlessly with the calm rhythm of the evening. Morty watched him, appreciating the rare, unspoken tenderness that sometimes emerged from the man he often found unpredictable and sharp. Even Rick's subtle gestures, the way he adjusted a wire, the faint glimmer of attention in his gaze, seemed to echo the magic of the sandwich. Care and memory, Morty thought, could exist anywhere, in anyone, if one simply had the patience to observe. Morty picked up the sandwich once more, studying it as though it held the answers to questions he hadn't yet formed. The bread, soft and yielding, seemed to remind him of moments he had overlooked. A laugh shared with Summer, a whispered explanation from Beth, a rare nod from Jerry. Each thought, each memory, was soft and fleeting, yet profoundly grounding, like a quiet thread tying him to the present while honoring the past. The sandwich, in its strange, uncanny way, had become a vessel of reflection, a gentle teacher in the art of noticing. He thought about the unseen friend that had lingered near him on other nights. Perhaps it had been observing too, learning from the quiet rituals of attention and care. Morty smiled faintly, feeling that small, unseen threads of life, presence, and memory were all connected in ways that didn't require explanation. The sandwich, the friend, the clouds outside, the hum of Rick's tinkering, they were all parts of the same quiet symphony, each note softly reminding him that he was part of something larger, tender and enduring. As the evening deepened, Morty felt the calm of the moment settle into him. He imagined the sandwich drifting gently into memory, carrying with it fragments of today's reflections, quietly embedding itself in the quiet architecture of his life. It was a small, almost imperceptible gift, but one that filled him with gratitude and wonder. He realized that the multiverse itself seemed to hold such moments, hidden in ordinary objects, waiting for attention to uncover them. Rick's hum softened, as if noticing Morty's contemplation, and Morty leaned back against the counter. The kitchen, once ordinary and mundane, now felt alive with presence and intention. Shadows moved gently. The faint breeze from the open window carried the scent of evening air and fading sunlight, and Morty let himself be fully present in the quiet harmony. The sandwich, the house, the hum of life, it all merged into a lullaby that gently pulled him toward reflection and calm. Morty set the sandwich down for the final time, savoring the quiet magic of what it had offered him. He understood that these moments, though small, were the true essence of life, the noticing, the reflection, the soft acknowledgement of presence, memory, and care. And as he let the evening wrap around him, he felt a quiet certainty that even in a chaotic universe, beauty, connection, and subtle wonder were always within reach, often hidden in the simplest of things. And somewhere, amid the soft hum of machines, the gentle drift of clouds, and the lingering warmth of the sandwich, Morty allowed himself to drift toward sleep, feeling the quiet embrace of a universe that cared, noticed, and held him tenderly in its infinite rhythm. The house was unusually quiet that evening. Even the hum of Rick's machines seemed to have softened, as though the universe itself had slowed to allow space for subtle connections. Morty wandered slowly through the living room, noticing the faint traces of earlier activity. A mug left half full on the table, a notebook with sketches of improbable inventions, the soft glimmer of tools reflecting the dim light. Everything was ordinary, yet every detail carried a gentle weight, a small evidence of care and attention that often went unnoticed. Rick was seated on the couch, leaning back, one leg tucked under the other, his gaze fixed on some distant thought that only he could see. Morty hesitated, unsure whether to speak or simply observe. But he realized that sometimes words were unnecessary. Presence itself, the quiet act of noticing, was enough. He sat beside Rick, letting the rhythm of the evening wrap around them, the soft creak of the couch beneath them, the muted hum of distant machines, the faint whisper of wind through an open window. Rick hummed softly, a low, An even tune that Morty had come to recognize as a kind of personal rhythm, one that carried both thought and reflection. Morty felt the vibrations in the floor, in the air, in the quiet pulse of the room, and he leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. In this quiet, he could feel the rare tenderness that occasionally surfaced from Rick, subtle but undeniable. It was not flamboyant or dramatic, but in its smallness, it was profound. Morty remembered earlier adventures, moments when Rick had shielded him in ways that weren't obvious, had provided guidance without announcing it, had offered care that was disguised as cynicism or distraction. Those memories surfaced gently, like clouds drifting across the sky of his mind. Morty realized that the quiet moments between them, the shared hums, the soft glances, the pauses where understanding passed without words, were the threads, holding their relationship together more than any wild adventure ever could. Rick shifted slightly, offering Morty a half-smile, fleeting and subtle. Morty smiled back, and in that simple exchange, he felt a current of warmth that carried through the quiet room. The world outside could remain chaotic, filled with impossible crises and unpredictable dangers. But here, in this shared stillness, everything seemed to make sense. Morty understood, without needing words. That connection was not always loud or dramatic. It often existed in fleeting gestures, small attentions, and patient presence. The hum of the machines in the garage resumed softly, but it no longer felt intrusive. It became part of the rhythm of the room, an accompaniment to their quiet, reflective companionship. Morty imagined the machines singing their own soft lullabies, echoes of thought, curiosity, and care woven into gears and wires. Rick's humming matched it almost perfectly, a duet of human and machine, of thought and reflection, of chaos tempered with quiet awareness. That Morty thought about the invisible friend he had sensed on previous nights. Perhaps it lingered nearby now, quietly observing the tender exchange between them, learning the small acts of care that defined their bond. He smiled faintly, feeling the threads of connection stretch gently outward. Rick, the unseen presence, the warmth of memory, the soft hum of machines, the quiet pulse of the house. Everything existed in a delicate balance, and Morty felt held, even amidst the vastness of possibilities that lay beyond their home. Rick reached for a small device, turning it over in his hands, adjusting a knob with careful attention. Morty noticed the subtleties in his movement, the patience, the precision, the almost imperceptible care in his actions. It reminded him that heroism was not always loud or spectacular. Sometimes it was found in small acts of consistency, of tending, of noticing without expecting acknowledgement. Morty felt the weight of that realization settle in his chest, a soft, grounding warmth. They spoke very little. Words in this moment seemed unnecessary. The quiet itself carried meaning, a reflection of years spent together navigating chaos, learning patience, discovering connection. Morty felt the gentle assurance that he was seen, that he mattered, that the threads of care between them had been strengthening quietly all along, without the fanfare or recognition that one might expect. The shadows in the room moved subtly, responding to the dim light and the hum of presence. Morty imagined the invisible friend curling along the edges of the furniture, a quiet witness to their connection. The world outside, with its infinite possibilities and unpredictable dangers, could wait. For now, there was only this, a shared rhythm, a quiet presence, a subtle acknowledgement that sometimes love and care were most potent when unspoken, almost invisible. Morty thought about the days and nights that had passed, each small moment accumulating like soft layers of memory and attention. He realized that the rare times when Rick had been gentle, thoughtful, and patient were not accidents. They were deliberate, hidden under the guise of everyday chaos. And now, in the quiet of the living room, though small, hidden gestures became visible in their effect. Warmth, connection, and the rare, profound reassurance that he was not alone. The evening stretched on, slow and deliberate. Morty leaned back against the couch, eyes half closed, listening to Rick's soft hums, the gentle creak of the house, the faint whisper of the night outside. Each sound, each movement, each small presence became a lullaby, guiding him toward calm reflection. Morty realized that connection was a quiet, patient art, and in this shared stillness, he understood it fully. As the night deepened, Morty allowed himself to sink further into the quiet, letting the soft rhythm of presence, memory, and care wrap around him. He felt the warmth of the unseen friend, the grounding calm of the clouds outside, and the subtle, grounding hum of Rick's attention. It was a quiet harmony, a lullaby not of sound alone, but of care, presence, and subtle connection, a reminder that even in the midst of chaos, moments of profound stillness could exist. And as Morty drifted toward sleep, he felt the gentle thread of connection between him and Rick, fragile yet enduring, delicate yet strong. It was in these moments, small and unspoken, that he realized the true power of companionship, noticing, presence, and patient care. Outside, the night sky stretched infinitely, carrying fragments of memory, soft whispers, and quiet wonder. Inside, Morty rested, held gently in the soft embrace of understanding, attention, and love. The evening felt softer than usual, as if the air itself had learned to breathe more slowly. Morty wandered through the hallway, the faint hum of the garage and the gentle rustle of the house settling, forming a quiet symphony around him. There were no sudden noises, no urgent demands, just a measured calm that seemed to encourage reflection. And yet, amidst the quiet, Morty sensed the presence of memories faint, fleeting, almost like whispers brushing past him in the corners of the room. He paused by the staircase, listening. For a moment, it felt as if someone or something was trying to speak to him without words. The whispers were soft, teasing, comforting, like old friends whose faces he couldn't fully remember, but whose warmth lingered in his chest. Morty smiled faintly. He had always carried fragments of old adventures, scattered memories of companions, allies, and even strangers who had left their marks on him, subtle yet enduring. Tonight, those fragments seemed alive, moving gently through the space around him. Morty's mind drifted, recalling voices and faces from past adventures that existed both in reality and in the strange, surreal layers of memory that often blended seamlessly. Some friends had been fleeting, passing through his life like shooting stars, leaving behind warmth and lessons in their brief presence. Others had lingered, teaching patience, courage, and the quiet value of attention. And now, as he listened to these whispers, Morty felt that he could sense them again, not physically, but in the gentle imprint they had left on his being. He imagined that each whisper carried a fragment of wisdom, a note of reassurance, a soft murmur, reminding him that connection could exist across time and space, unbroken by distance or circumstance. Perhaps the universe remembered more than he did, preserving echoes of moments that he thought were lost. Morty felt the invisible threads of presence stretch across the room, pulling gently at his awareness, connecting him to memories he hadn't realized he was still carrying. Rick entered the hallway quietly, pausing when he noticed Morty lost in thought. He didn't interrupt, didn't speak, but let the silence linger between them. Morty realized that Rick, in his rare, unguarded moments, understood the subtle power of presence. The quiet companionship, the mutual acknowledgement without words, was itself a kind of guidance. And in this quiet, Morty felt safe, seen, and understood in a way that was rare, fragile, and deeply grounding. The whispers grew slightly stronger, though never overwhelming. Morty felt that these echoes were not dangerous or intrusive, but gentle reminders, like memories brushing softly against the edges of awareness. They carried warmth and care, laughter and consolation, hints of lessons learned and small joys experienced. Morty could almost feel them tracing the contours of his mind, settling gently in the quiet spaces where he often felt doubt or uncertainty. He thought about the invisible friend he had noticed on previous nights, wondering if it had joined these whispers. Perhaps it was listening, guiding, or merely observing, a patient presence that understood the value of subtle attention. Morty smiled faintly at the thought, feeling that these quiet guardians of memory were everywhere, tucked into corners, drifting along shadows, and carrying the gentle weight of continuity, care, and quiet reflection. Morty moved slowly through the hallway, letting the whispers guide him. They reminded him of laughter shared with Summer, advice from Beth that lingered longer than she realized, and even small moments of connection with Jerry, fleeting but real. Each memory, each echo, carried a soft light, illuminating not just the past, but the value of noticing, remembering, and cherishing the quiet ways that love and care manifest. The night outside had deepened, shadows stretching long across the floor, yet the hallway felt warm with these faint echoes. Morty realized that the whispers of old friends were not just reminders of what had been. They were threads connecting him to who he was and who he was becoming. Even in the chaos of adventures, the surreal complexities of the multiverse, and the unpredictability of Rick's inventions, these threads held steady, grounding him in subtle but profound ways. Rick hummed softly in the distance, and Morty felt the rhythm of that hum blend with the whispers. The soft cadence carried reassurance, continuity, and a rare intimacy that spoke of patience, observation, and quiet care. Morty felt the weight of presence in a new way, how small acts, unnoticed gestures, and fleeting moments accumulate, creating a soft foundation for connection, understanding, and emotional resilience. Morty paused by the window, gazing at the faint stars beginning to appear above the Smith house. He imagined the whispers floating upward, blending with the distant light of the universe, carrying fragments of memories and echoes of care across time and space. Each whisper was a gentle nudge, reminding him that even when friends were absent, even when adventures had passed, the resonance of kindness, courage, and companionship lingered. He reflected on the way old friends, memories, and echoes could intrude softly into the present, not to alarm or disturb, but to remind, comfort, and guide. Morty realized that these whispers, the subtle presence of the unseen friend, and Rick's rare moments of gentle care were all part of the same delicate architecture of life, a structure built not of spectacle or heroism, but of attention, presence, and enduring connection. Morty breathed deeply, letting the quiet wash over him. The whispers settled, the house exhaled softly, and for a moment all was still. He felt grounded, connected, and tenderly aware of the threads that linked past, present, and possibility. Even in the midst of infinite universes, strange adventures, and chaotic inventions, there were constant gentle reminders that care, attention, and quiet reflection endured. And as he allowed himself to sink into the calm of the night, Morty felt the warmth of presence, memory, and connection wrap around him. The whispers of old friends, soft yet persistent, carried him toward dreams, leaving him with a sense of continuity, belonging, and quiet wonder. Outside, the stars shimmered faintly, the house breathed softly, and Morty drifted into a calm, reflective space, comforted by the persistent, gentle embrace of unseen threads of care. Morty wandered through the backyard, the soft glow of evening light spilling across the garden in golden threads. The flowers and plants seemed ordinary at first, but as he walked slowly among them, he began to notice subtle patterns, small hints of presence that felt almost alive. Some leaves shivered as if in response to his thoughts, petals tilted gently toward him, and tiny, unseen currents of air seemed to brush his skin with deliberate care. It was a garden that carried memories, not just of plants, but of moments and people, names and faces he could no longer fully recall. Rick appeared silently at the garden's edge, holding a small device that pulsed with a soft, ambient light. Morty did not need to ask what it was. He felt that the garden itself seemed to respond to Rick, as if understanding the presence of someone who had always been just slightly out of reach, both physically and emotionally. Rick's quiet gaze swept over the plants, lingering for a moment on a cluster of flowers that bent toward the fading sun, and Morty realized that sometimes attention alone could coax life to reveal its hidden resonance. The garden smelled faintly of rain and soil, a combination both grounding and otherworldly. Morty noticed that some of the flowers seemed to shimmer with faint, almost imperceptible colors, as if recalling names long forgotten. He thought of friends, allies, and even strangers whose faces had blurred over time, yet whose presence had left subtle imprints in his life. In this garden, these imprints were tangible, softly glowing threads woven through the stems and leaves, whispers of memory carried by the plants themselves. Rick moved closer, adjusting the small device, and the air seemed to hum ever so lightly in response. Morty felt the hum resonate in his chest, a gentle vibration that connected him to the garden, the house, and the fading light of the day. The garden became a quiet map of connection, a place where the weight of forgotten names could linger safely, neither lost nor entirely remembered, existing in a space that honored both absence and presence. Morty knelt to examine a small, delicate bloom that seemed to tremble when he touched it. He imagined that each plant held a story, some joyful, some sorrowful, but all quietly anchoring the world in memory. Some names were sharp and clear, etched into the essence of their forms. Others were vague, almost imperceptible, yet their subtle resonance was enough to remind him that every encounter, every life, every fleeting moment left a trace. Rick spoke softly, almost a whisper, though Morty could hear him clearly. These gardens, they're like memory itself. Some names linger, some fade, but they all shape the life you're living now. Morty nodded slowly, feeling the truth in the words. The garden wasn't just a place of plants. It was a quiet repository of experience, a living archive of subtle care, small joys, and enduring bonds. It reminded him that even when memories fade, the echoes remain, shaping thought, feeling, and presence in ways that were gentle but profound. Morty stood and wandered further into the garden, noticing a small pathway lined with stones that seemed to glow faintly in response to his steps. Each stone felt like a marker of an unseen presence, a quiet acknowledgement of moments that had mattered. Some were names he recognized immediately. Others were vague, teasing, hinting at stories he could not fully recall. Yet the garden welcomed him regardless, a soft, patient teacher that encouraged attention without judgment. He paused by a small patch of lavender, inhaling the calming scent and feeling the gentle hum of familiarity and memory. Morty thought about the unseen friend he had sensed before, wondering if it now drifted through the garden, observing, learning, participating silently in the quiet ritual of remembrance. Perhaps the garden itself was alive in subtle ways, responding to thought, emotion, and care. Each flower, each leaf, each faint shimmer of light carried the soft pulse of attention, waiting for someone to notice and honor it. Rick walked beside him, quietly plucking a small flower and tucking it behind Morty's ear with a rare, tender smile. Morty felt warmth spread through his chest, a recognition of small acts of care that spoke louder than words. It was a reminder that heroism was not always dramatic. Sometimes it was this: noticing, acknowledging, and quietly tending to the world and those around you. The garden, the names. The subtle interactions all intertwined to create a rhythm of attention that was almost sacred in its simplicity. The evening deepened, and the garden's shadows lengthened, yet Morty felt a gentle calm that anchored him. He noticed the names lingering in petals and stones, floating in air and light, connecting him to moments of joy, sorrow, and quiet reflection. It was as if the universe itself had folded time and memory into this small space, offering a moment of understanding that transcended words. Morty realized that the garden did not demand memory, only presence, and that sometimes that was enough. He knelt again, tracing the edges of a glowing stone with his fingertips. A name whispered to him, not in words but in feeling soft, fleeting, and resonant. Morty imagined all the friends, old and new, real and imagined, that had shaped his life, their echoes captured here, gently guiding him. The garden reminded him that even forgotten names had power, subtle but enduring, reminding him that attention, care, and reflection were forces as tangible as any adventure. Rick stepped back, humming a low tune that blended with the quiet sounds of the garden. Morty closed his eyes, letting the soft evening air, the faint light, and the echoes of forgotten names settle into him. He felt the gentle embrace of continuity, of memory, and of the subtle threads connecting him to family, friends, and the larger, unfolding universe. The garden, in all its quiet wonder, was a place of reflection, care, and serene understanding, a lullaby composed of life's smallest, most enduring threads. And as the night settled fully over the Smith house, Morty allowed himself to breathe deeply, letting the garden's whispers, the hum of Rick, and the fading twilight carry him toward calm. He felt the invisible threads of care, memory, and attention wrapping around him like a soft cloak, guiding him into rest, reflection, and quiet wonder. Here, amid the garden of forgotten names, Morty understood that presence, acknowledgement, and subtle connection were as profound as any grand adventure. The night sky stretched above the Smith house, wide and infinite, a vast canvas of soft starlight and slow, deliberate darkness. Morty lay on the grass in the backyard, staring upward, tracing the constellations with his eyes. The stars seemed unusually close tonight, bending their light gently, as though leaning in to listen to the quiet murmurs of the world below. Morty felt a sense of intimacy in the vastness, a soft acknowledgement that even across immeasurable distance, the universe could hear him, could see him, could hold him tenderly. Rick appeared beside him, settling on the grass with a quiet sigh. He didn't speak, didn't direct Morty to the constellations. He simply existed beside him, a steady presence in the rhythm of night. Morty felt the comfort of that proximity, the subtle reassurance that some bonds required neither words nor actions. They existed simply in being, in presence, in shared quiet attention. The stars above seemed to mirror that understanding, bending their points of light toward them, as if to reflect the stillness. Below, Morty thought about the adventures they had shared, the strange creatures, impossible landscapes, and surreal inventions. And yet, here, beneath the soft glow of the stars, none of that mattered. It was not the chaos or spectacle that defined their lives, but these moments of quiet observation, the gentle acknowledgement of presence, and the rare, fleeting understanding between two people who had seen and survived so much. Morty felt the weight of gratitude settle gently in his chest. A faint breeze stirred the grass, whispering softly through the night. Morty imagined it carried fragments of memory, fragments of the people and experiences that had shaped him. Perhaps the stars could hear them too, bending just enough to catch echoes of laughter, whispers of care, and the quiet pulse of connection. Morty closed his eyes for a moment, letting the faint hum of the universe wrap around him, and felt a profound calm descend, soft and unhurried, like a lullaby composed of light and silence. Rick hummed faintly, a low, gentle melody that mingled with the rhythm of the night. Morty felt the vibrations in the air, a subtle resonance that seemed to link him not only to Rick, but to the faint, unseen currents of life around them, the grass beneath them, the gentle sway of leaves, the lingering warmth of the house nearby. It was as if the entire world conspired to create this soft moment, a quiet symphony for those willing to notice. Morty imagined that the stars, in their patient, distant wisdom, had seen it all, the joys, the sorrows, the countless threads of cause and effect stretching across space and time. And yet they bent tonight not to judge or witness, but to listen, to reflect, to participate silently in the gentle rhythm of human experience. Morty felt a kinship with the universe, a sense of belonging that had little to do with grandeur and everything to do with quiet, awareness, and emotional presence. Rick shifted slightly, pointing out a faint streak of light across the sky. "Shooting star," he murmured, voice low. Morty nodded, watching it fade slowly, leaving behind a subtle trail of luminescence. He thought of all the moments he had let slip by, unrecognized, unnoticed, unacknowledged. Yet here, in the hush of night, he felt that even those moments, those fleeting instants of presence, were collected gently by the universe, remembered softly by the stars that bent to listen. Morty realized that heroism, adventure, and courage were not always loud or dramatic. Often they existed in the quiet, reflective moments where awareness met attention. Every act of noticing, every small gesture of care, every tender acknowledgement of presence, these were the true constellations in life, illuminating existence as profoundly as any star. He felt a gentle pride and warmth, knowing that he, too, had learned to bend toward care and understanding, quietly, subtly, and with intention. The invisible friend he had sensed on other nights seemed present here, too, a soft, unseen companion, blending seamlessly into the rhythm of the evening. Morty imagined it drifting among the stars' light, feeling the gentle tug of presence, and adding its quiet awareness to the symphony. He smiled faintly, comforted by the notion that even unseen forces could participate in care and reflection, reinforcing the threads that bound him to Rick, the family, and the subtle, pervasive pulse of the universe. Rick leaned back, eyes scanning the horizon, and Morty felt a rare moment of closeness. Words were unnecessary. The stars, the grass, the faint rustle of the house settling, and Rick's quiet hum conveyed more than any conversation ever could. Morty understood that these shared silences, these small acknowledgments, were the most profound expressions of connection he had ever known. The bending stars above were witness and lullaby, a reminder that the universe itself could mirror the tenderness and care found in human attention. Morty's mind wandered, tracing patterns in the constellations that seemed to shift gently in response to his thoughts. Each star, each faint streak of light, carried whispers of care, fragments of memory, and soft reminders of presence. He realized that even the smallest gestures, the quiet hum of a machine, a shared glance, an unspoken acknowledgement, were as significant as any dramatic moment of adventure. They wove continuity, comfort, and subtle wonder into the fabric of life, quietly shaping perception and feeling. The night deepened, wrapping the Smith house in soft darkness, yet the stars above provided a gentle glow. Morty felt the hum of the universe, Rick's presence, and the lingering touch of unseen threads wrap around him. Here, in this quiet, reflective space, he felt a profound sense of belonging. He understood that the stars, bending patiently to listen, offered more than light. They offered attention, acknowledgement, and a gentle resonance that mirrored the quiet acts of care in his own life. As Morty allowed himself to sink fully into the soft rhythm of the night, he felt the pull of calm reflection and quiet wonder. The stars whispered their gentle encouragement. The unseen friend drifted near, and Rick's soft hum blended into the lullaby of the universe. Morty let himself drift into the awareness of connection, presence, and tender observation, carried gently toward dreams, reflection, and the soft, patient rhythm of existence. And in that moment, as the stars bent ever so slightly toward the backyard, Morty felt the quiet intimacy of the universe, the gentle weight of care, and the enduring strength of bonds both seen and unseen. He breathed deeply, letting the hum, the light, and the quiet understanding guide him into rest, reflection, and calm. The evening had settled into a soft hush, the world outside the Smith house seemingly taking its time to breathe. Morty wandered into the living room, noticing the faint traces of a day spent quietly in reflection. The air was warm, but carried the gentle coolness of approaching night, and the subtle creaks of the house became almost musical, a lullaby composed of familiarity and gentle motion. Morty felt the pull of thought, a quiet curiosity pressing at the edges of his mind, nudging him toward reflection about choices he had made and those he had yet to face. Rick sat nearby, tinkering softly with a small device that hummed in a measured rhythm. Morty noticed how carefully Rick moved, each gesture deliberate, each turn of a knob precise. It was in this deliberate attention that Morty saw courage, not the kind born from recklessness or bravado, but a quiet, patient courage grounded in thought, observation, and care. Sometimes the most important decisions required silence, patience, and gentle awareness rather than urgency. Morty's mind wandered to moments from earlier in the day. There had been small opportunities to act differently. A word left unsaid, a glance unnoticed, a subtle choice between rushing forward or pausing to understand. He realized that each decision, no matter how small, carried weight, shaping relationships, memories, and the quiet rhythm of life. Courage, he thought, was not always dramatic. It often manifested in the measured, mindful choices that preserved connection, attention, and care. He reflected on past adventures, where chaos and uncertainty had forced him to act quickly. In contrast, tonight's moments were still, soft, and deliberate, emphasizing the internal landscape rather than external spectacle. Morty recognized that courage could be as simple as choosing to listen, to wait, or to acknowledge what was often ignored. Each choice, quiet and intentional, contributed to the foundation of trust, care, and understanding he shared with Rick, family, and the unseen threads of connection in their world. Rick hummed a low tune, one Morty had come to associate with reflection and attention. Morty realized that in this shared stillness, the hum itself seemed like encouragement, an affirmation that choosing patience, noticing subtleties, and honoring presence were themselves acts of bravery. The quiet courage of choice was like a soft light in the dim corridors of the mind, guiding the way without fanfare or urgency. Morty considered the invisible friend he had sensed in previous nights, imagining it hovering nearby, observing, quietly affirming the significance of choices made with thoughtfulness. Perhaps courage was not a solitary act, but a network of quiet support, subtle guidance, and gentle acknowledgement. The thought comforted him, adding a layer of reassurance that even the smallest, most introspective decisions could resonate deeply and shape lives in meaningful ways. He moved toward the window, gazing at the slow dance of clouds across the twilight sky. Each cloud seemed to carry fragments of past choices, moments of hesitation, and small acts of insight. Morty realized that courage often existed in the interplay between action and reflection, between instinct and awareness, and that understanding this rhythm was itself a form of wisdom. The sky's soft movement mirrored the ebb and flow of decisions, choices bending gently like stars, leaning in to listen. Rick's presence beside him, steady and patient, reinforced the lesson without words. Morty felt the rhythm of shared understanding, the silent acknowledgement of internal deliberation, and the quiet pulse of courage that flowed from awareness rather than spectacle. Sometimes the right choice was not the loudest, fastest, or most obvious. It was the one that preserved care, attention, and continuity, quietly shaping the bonds that mattered most. Morty reflected on recent moments with his family. Choices made in small, subtle ways, listening to Summer's concerns, acknowledging Beth's guidance, showing patience toward Jerry's fumbling attempts, had quietly built resilience and trust. He realized that courage was not measured by grand heroism or flashy action, but by the consistency of intention, the willingness to notice, and the patience to act with gentle care. These quiet acts of bravery were often invisible to the world, yet profoundly meaningful. The evening deepened further, shadows stretching long and soft across the floor. Morty felt the hum of life in the house, the faint creaks, the subtle movement of air, the quiet presence of Rick settling into a rhythm that carried him gently forward. He understood that the quiet courage of choice was ongoing, cumulative, and often imperceptible, but it shaped the emotional landscape of those around him, binding moments and people together in subtle, meaningful ways. Morty knelt briefly to adjust a small stack of books on the shelf, noticing the care in simple acts. Even the smallest gestures, he realized, were forms of choice acts of attention, recognition, and presence. Courage could be present in these minute actions, flowing quietly through the patterns of daily life, unnoticed by most, yet profoundly influential in their gentle, cumulative effect. He felt the warmth of quiet satisfaction, a reminder that even small decisions could ripple outward in unseen ways. Rick glanced at him with a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, as if confirming what Morty had silently understood. Courage was not always celebrated, but it was deeply honored in moments like this, in the attentive gaze, the deliberate action, the patient presence. Morty felt a quiet, steady strength settle in his chest, grounding him, reassuring him, and weaving a soft thread of continuity through the uncertainties of life and adventure bout. Morty returned to the couch, sitting beside Rick, and let the quiet rhythm of the evening envelop him. The hum of machines, the faint rustle of the house, and the gentle pull of night outside combined into a lullaby of patience, reflection, and gentle courage. Morty allowed himself to sink into the awareness that every small, deliberate choice mattered, not because it was noticed, but because it nurtured understanding, trust, and care. And as Morty leaned back, eyes half closed, the evening settled around him like a soft blanket. He felt the invisible threads of courage, presence, and attention wrap him gently, a quiet reassurance that even amidst chaos and uncertainty, he had the capacity to act with thoughtfulness, care, and resilience. The soft hum of the night, Rick's steady presence, and the gentle rhythm of quiet choices carried him toward reflection, calm, and a profound sense of gentle wonder. The living room was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of a fading sunset that filtered through the curtains. Shadows stretched across the floor, elongating familiar furniture into shapes that felt both comforting and slightly unfamiliar. Morty wandered slowly across the room, noticing the subtle hum of the house settling, the faint echoes of earlier laughter and conversation, lingering like gentle imprints on the air. It was a room alive with memory, yet it felt more like a space for reflection than for action. Rick sat in his usual spot, tinkering quietly with one of his small devices. The device hummed softly, a low vibration that seemed to resonate with the pulse of the living room itself. Morty approached cautiously, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of presence that filled the space. He noticed how the shadows of their earlier movements lingered faintly on the walls, subtle traces of gestures, glances, and quiet words. These echoes were not ghosts, they were reminders, delicate threads connecting the moments that mattered most. Morty sank onto the couch beside Rick, letting the quiet settle over him like a soft blanket. He could hear the faint creak of the floorboards, the whisper of the wind through a slightly open window, and the gentle vibration of Rick's tinkering. It was in this harmony of small sounds that Morty felt the living room itself breathing, carrying with it the weight of memory, connection, and subtle care. Each echo was a reflection of time passing, a gentle acknowledgement of all the quiet acts that had unfolded. Here, Morty's thoughts drifted to the adventures they had shared, to moments of chaos and laughter, fear and courage. And yet, in the calm of the living room, none of that felt urgent. What mattered now were the echoes, the soft traces of presence, the small signs of care, and the unspoken understanding that existed between him and Rick. Morty, realized that the true essence of their life together was not only in the wild adventures, but in the quiet aftermath, in the soft, reflective spaces where connection deepened and trust endured. He noticed the faint reflection of light off a half-empty mug on the table, the subtle tilt of a book left open, the gentle hum of a distant machine. These simple details, mundane to an unobservant eye, carried stories of care and attention. Morty felt the weight of these echoes, understanding that even when actions were unnoticed or unremarkable, they could leave lasting impressions, soft threads that shaped the living room and the people inhabiting it. Rick's low humming shifted slightly, a melody that seemed almost conversational in its rhythm. Morty listened, letting the sound weave around him, blending with the faint creak of the couch, the muted light, and the lingering shadows. It was as if the room itself responded to the music, the echoes, and their presence, creating a gentle symphony of reflection and quiet understanding. Morty felt a warmth in his chest, a soft reassurance that these quiet moments were as meaningful as any grand adventure. The invisible friend that often hovered at the edges of Morty's awareness seemed to drift into the living room now, almost imperceptibly. Its presence was not intrusive, but rather a silent affirmation, observing the delicate interactions between Morty, Rick, and the environment around them. Morty imagined it following the gentle trail of echoes, sensing the layers of memory and care embedded in each object, each shadow, each subtle shift of light. Morty's mind wandered to the family, imagining echoes of Summer's laughter, Beth's quiet guidance, and Jerry's tentative gestures of care mingling with the shadows. Even though they were absent in this moment, their influence lingered in the patterns of presence, leaving soft imprints that shaped the room's quiet rhythm. Morty realized that love, in its most enduring form, often exists as an accumulation of small gestures and attentive presence, carried gently across time and space like a quiet hum. He leaned back against the couch, noticing the way light and shadow interacted across the walls, creating subtle, shifting patterns. Each movement, each reflection, became a reminder of impermanence and continuity, a visual echo of lives lived together, moments shared, and bonds nurtured through patient care. Morty understood that these echoes, though quiet and often unnoticed, formed the foundation of understanding and connection, the invisible threads linking past, present, and possibility. Rick paused in his tinkering, glancing briefly at Morty, and offered a rare, fleeting smile. Morty felt the gentle reinforcement of their bond in that simple gesture. No words were needed. The acknowledgement itself was profound. He realized that courage, attention, and connection were present not only in dramatic events, but in these quiet moments, in the shared stillness, in the unspoken acknowledgement of presence. Morty's gaze drifted across the room again, taking in the subtle echoes of past conversations, laughter, and movement. He could almost see the ghosts of these moments in the soft light, each a reminder that life's significance often lay not in grand gestures, but in persistence, care, and attention. The living room, in its quiet resonance, became a repository of these echoes, a gentle map of presence and affection, a reflection of the subtle courage required to notice, to remember, and to care. As the night deepened, the hum of machines, the faint creak of furniture, and the shifting shadows blended into a lullaby of presence and reflection. Morty allowed himself to sink fully into the gentle rhythm, feeling the echoes wrap around him like a soft embrace. He understood that the living room, like life itself, was composed not only of the dramatic and urgent, but also of the subtle, quiet acts that left lasting impressions on the heart and mind. Morty closed his eyes, letting the living room's soft echoes guide him toward calm. He felt the invisible threads of memory, care, and presence settle gently around him, a quiet affirmation that even amidst chaos and adventure, there was room for reflection, understanding, and soft connection. The hum, the shadows, and Rick's steady presence became a lullaby, carrying him into contemplation, calm, and gentle wonder. And in that serene space, surrounded by echoes both seen and unseen, Morty understood the quiet truth. Life's weight, its care, and its wonder often exist in subtle reverberations. The soft imprints left behind by attention, love, and patience. He breathed slowly, feeling the living room fold around him like a soft, protective cloak, carrying him gently towards sleep, reflection, and the quiet joy of being fully present. The morning light was gentle, spilling lazily through the windows of the Smith household. Dust motes danced in the golden haze, and Morty moved through the kitchen with quiet deliberation, noticing the small details, the tilt of a coffee mug, the soft creak of the floorboards, the faint hum of Rick's morning tinkering in the garage. It was in these moments, so easily overlooked, that the threads of care were most visible, subtle, yet resilient, binding the family and their odd little world together. Morty poured himself a cup of warm coffee, inhaling the soft aroma. He thought about Rick, about the quiet ways his grandfather showed care without words or fanfare. It was in the precise hum of a machine, the careful arrangement of tools, the occasional glance that acknowledged Morty's presence without requiring conversation. These threads of care wove through daily life, almost invisible, yet deeply anchoring. Morty realized that care often required attention, patience, and a willingness to act quietly, without seeking recognition or applause. Rick emerged from the garage, his hair still wild, eyes gleaming faintly as he adjusted a small device in his hands. Morty watched him, noticing the way Rick's movements carried intention, even in the smallest details. The threads of care were woven not in grand gestures or heroic exploits, but in the meticulous attention to the lives and feelings of those around him. Morty felt warmth spread through his chest, an acknowledgement that these quiet actions held immense significance, shaping the world in gentle, lasting ways. Morty wandered into the living room, feeling the soft vibrations of life around him, the faint hum of appliances, the subtle creak of furniture settling, the muted sound of a distant clock. Each of these elements seemed to pulse with quiet attention, like a heartbeat woven into the space itself. Morty realized that the threads of care were everywhere, in the unnoticed, mundane moments that collectively created an environment of connection, safety, and enduring presence. He thought about the family, about Summer and Beth, and even Jerry. Their small gestures, sometimes overlooked, added to this tapestry of care. Summer's laughter that lingered in the hall, Beth's thoughtful words tucked into ordinary moments, Jerry's tentative but sincere attempts at participation, all of it accumulated, forming a soft, resilient web of presence. Morty felt the strength of these threads as clearly as if he could touch them, gentle yet unbreakable, connecting each member of the family in ways both visible and hidden. Rick adjusted his device again, a low hum echoing softly through the room. Morty noticed how the device's glow pulsed in harmony with the gentle rhythm of the household, almost as if it were a metronome for attention and care. He realized that even the most intricate machines, the most complex inventions, were infused with care when tended to mindfully. The threads were not limited to human action. They extended into the environment, into moments of quiet observation, into the subtle interweaving of presence and intention. Morty knelt beside the kitchen counter, observing the small crumbs left from breakfast, the faint imprint of hands brushing against a plate. Each trace carried meaning, a quiet acknowledgement of someone's attention, effort, or thoughtfulness. Morty understood the threads of care were often ephemeral, fleeting, and easily overlooked, yet their presence shaped experience profoundly. Even actions that seemed insignificant could ripple outward, connecting lives, fostering trust, and creating spaces of safety and belonging. Rick's hum shifted slightly, a softer, almost conversational tone that felt like an extension of the room itself. Morty listened, letting the sound intertwine with the subtle rhythms of daily life, recognizing it as a reinforcement of the invisible bonds holding them together. These threads of care were woven in repetition, in attention, in the gentle constancy of presence. Morty realized that care was not a singular event, but a continuous, evolving practice, one that required observation, patience, and the willingness to nurture quietly. Morty's thoughts drifted to moments past, to friends and companions whose presence had left echoes in his life. He imagined that each interaction, each shared experience, contributed to the same delicate tapestry. The garden of forgotten names, the whispers of old friends, the bending stars, they were all part of this network of attention, reflection, and care. Morty felt gratitude for the invisible threads linking past and present, a soft reassurance that even moments thought lost were still alive in subtle, enduring ways. He wandered back into the living room, touching the edge of a couch cushion, noticing the faint impression left by Rick's recent presence. Morty reflected on the idea that care could exist without notice, that the quiet acknowledgement of existence, attention, and intention could create profound resonance. Each thread was a soft tether, grounding him, reminding him that connection was both delicate and durable, a network that spanned time, space, and understanding. Rick's voice, low and almost imperceptible, broke the silence. "It's all in the little things, Morty. The attention you give, the patience you keep. That's how the world stays together." Morty nodded, understanding without needing further elaboration. The threads of care were subtle yet strong, weaving through moments, people, and actions, forming a quiet architecture of emotional presence that endured beyond words or recognition. Morty sank into the couch, letting the soft rhythms of attention, care, and presence envelop him. The room's hum, the lingering traces of movement, and Rick's quiet accompaniment formed a gentle lullaby of reflection. Morty realized that even amidst chaos, uncertainty, and unpredictable adventures, these threads provided continuity, comfort, and stability. They were the quiet backbone of life, invisible yet persistent, guiding him toward awareness, connection, and calm. As the day continued, Morty allowed himself to notice each subtle interaction, each small gesture, and each quiet echo. He understood that threads of care were cumulative, invisible to the casual observer, yet profoundly shaping the world and the people within it. And in this realization, Morty felt a deep sense of calm, connection, and understanding, recognizing that the soft persistence of attention, presence, and care was itself a form of quiet heroism. And in the gentle light of the afternoon, amidst the soft hum of life in the Smith household, Morty felt the invisible threads of care wrap around him like a comforting cloak. He breathed slowly, letting awareness, attention, and reflection guide him toward calm, reflection, and a gentle sense of belonging. The threads were everywhere, weaving the family, the house, and the universe into a subtle, enduring tapestry of connection. The house felt unusually still, the kind of silence that carries both comfort and curiosity. Morty walked slowly through the hallway, his footsteps muted against the carpet, sensing a subtle shift in the air. There was no alarm, no immediate danger, only a quiet, almost imperceptible feeling that something had entered their space, something unseen, drifting in the corners of awareness. The invisible intruder, Morty thought, was not threatening in the usual sense. It was a gentle reminder of the unknown, a presence felt rather than seen, shaping perception in the softest, most introspective ways. Rick appeared at the kitchen doorway, adjusting a small device that emitted faint pulses of light. He glanced at Morty with a rare softness, acknowledging the subtle tension that had arisen. "Sometimes the things you don't see," Rick said quietly, "carry as much weight as the things you do." Morty nodded, feeling the truth in that statement. The intruder was less a threat and more a mirror, reflecting unseen thoughts, hidden concerns, and subtle emotional patterns that had gone unrecognized. Morty moved into the living room, where shadows stretched long across the furniture in the dim light. He sensed the intruder's presence as a faint hum, a gentle vibration against the backdrop of the familiar. It was almost musical, weaving through the household's normal rhythms, aligning itself with the soft echoes of memory, care, and reflection that had filled the space in earlier days. Morty realized that the invisible intruder was not an enemy. It was a catalyst, inviting attention, awareness, and quiet acknowledgement. Rick knelt beside a small device on the table, its faint glow pulsing in harmony with the soft rhythms of the room. "Not everything out there needs confrontation," Rick murmured, voice low. "Sometimes you just need to notice, understand, and let it exist without panic." Morty felt a deep resonance in those words. Courage, he understood, often came in subtle, understated forms: the decision to observe, the choice to attend, the willingness to respect unseen forces rather than fight them blindly. Morty wandered through the room slowly, sensing the intruder in the air itself. It was a presence woven into the folds of light and shadow, dancing on the edge of perception. He imagined it drifting among objects, brushing past memories, observing without interference. And in its quiet observation, Morty saw a reflection of his own curiosity, his own tendency to notice subtleties that others might overlook. The intruder became a teacher, a reminder that attention and presence could transform uncertainty into insight. He paused by a window, watching the evening clouds drift lazily across the sky. The intruder seemed to echo the movement outside, soft, unobtrusive, and endlessly patient. Morty reflected on all the times he had been aware of subtle presences, unseen influences, or faint traces of thought in their adventures with Rick. Each encounter had carried lessons in observation, empathy, and gentle understanding. The invisible intruder now carried a similar lesson: to honor the unseen, to engage with patience, and to recognize that not all influence is loud or immediate. Rick hummed softly, tinkering with the device, and Morty felt the vibrations mingle with the quiet tension in the room. The intruder seemed to respond, not aggressively, but curiously, bending gently toward the rhythm of the household. Morty noticed how even the smallest acts of presence, adjusting a cushion, straightening a book, noticing a faint shadow, created subtle shifts, weaving a soft dialogue between the family and the unseen. Threads of care, awareness, and attention rippled outward, shaping perception in invisible yet profound ways. Morty thought of the family, the echoes of Summer's laughter, Beth's calm guidance, and Jerry's awkward kindness. He imagined the intruder passing near these memories, acknowledging them, adding subtle presence without interference. In this quiet interplay, Morty understood that even unseen influences could carry meaning, shaping emotions, decisions, and reflections in ways that were soft but lasting. The invisible intruder became part of the larger rhythm of life, a gentle participant in the ongoing weave of care, connection, and memory. He knelt to touch a faintly glowing device that Rick had left on the counter, feeling the subtle hum reverberate through the room. The intruder seemed drawn to these vibrations, weaving around the pulse of attention, aligning with moments of reflection, and blending into the ambient presence of the household. Morty realized that awareness alone could harmonize with uncertainty, creating a soft equilibrium that encouraged observation, patience, and quiet understanding rather than fear or reaction. Rick glanced at Morty with a fleeting smile, as if to affirm his unspoken understanding. Courage, Rick implied, was not always in grand gestures. It could be in noticing, attending, and engaging gently with the unseen, letting awareness guide action. Morty felt the lesson settle within him, a gentle confirmation that even subtle presences, unseen threads, or quiet disruptions could be navigated with calm, reflection, and respect. Morty's gaze wandered across the living room again, tracing the faint traces of shadows, light, and sound. The invisible intruder drifted quietly among them, a presence neither imposing nor threatening, yet deeply felt. He understood that this subtle force was teaching him more than any overt encounter could. It was revealing the value of quiet observation, mindful attention, and the courage to engage gently with uncertainty. As the night deepened, the hum of life in the Smith household blended seamlessly with the subtle presence of the intruder. Morty allowed himself to sink into the rhythm, feeling the soft threads of care, memory, and attention enfold him. The intruder's quiet presence became another element in the tapestry of awareness, reflection, and connection, a reminder that not all influence needed to be seen or named to matter profoundly. And as Morty settled into the gentle cadence of the night, he felt the invisible intruder's presence soften into something akin to companionship. It was a quiet affirmation that attention, observation, and care could transform uncertainty into understanding. The threads of care, memory, and awareness intertwined with the unseen, guiding him toward calm, reflection, and the subtle wonder of the unknown. Night had draped itself softly over the Smith house, and Morty lay on his bed staring at the ceiling, letting the familiar shapes of shadows stretch and fold across the walls. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint vibrations of Rick's ongoing tinkering somewhere down the hall. Morty felt a gentle pull in his chest, a tender tug toward memory and reflection. There was a weight in thinking of what had been lost, not dramatic or sharp, but soft, lingering, like the echo of a song remembered after all the words have faded. He thought of friends and companions who had drifted away, of fleeting encounters across worlds and times. Faces blurred in the haze of memory, some bright with laughter, others faint and melancholic. Morty realized that loss was not always about absence. Sometimes it was the soft imprint left behind, the faint resonance in the spaces we inhabit, the gentle tug that makes a person pause and feel. Even the smallest moments, once gone, could leave profound echoes in the heart, shaping perception and deepening understanding. Rick appeared in the doorway silently, as though he had always been part of the shadows themselves. Morty noticed the faint lines of fatigue around Rick's eyes, softened by the low, almost imperceptible smile that sometimes appeared when he thought no one was watching. "Dreams have a way of catching what slipped through the cracks," Rick murmured softly, sitting on the edge of Morty's bed. "Even the things we didn't mean to lose. They linger if you know where to look." Morty nodded, sensing the quiet truth in those words. Morty closed his eyes, letting the weight of memory settle gently around him. He imagined a soft room, filled with the echoes of laughter, conversation, and shared silence. Each memory carried a subtle glow, like fragments of light refracted through the prism of time. Even those lost or forgotten friends, creatures, fleeting adventures, added layers to the quiet architecture of his heart. Morty realized that the dreams of what was lost were not painful intrusions, but gentle reminders of the richness of experience, the depth of connection, and the persistence of care. Rick hummed softly, a low, comforting sound that seemed to blend with the rhythm of Morty's thoughts. Morty listened, letting the hum anchor him, shaping the cadence of reflection and emotional understanding. He thought of the invisible threads that connected him to others, the threads that persisted even when a presence had vanished. Sometimes the dream of what was lost was a gift, a soft lens through which he could see the value of fleeting moments, the quiet persistence of care, and the subtle influence of past experiences. The night seemed to breathe with him, the faint rustle of the wind outside mingling with the quiet vibrations of the house. Morty imagined that the stars beyond the window were watching, bending their light gently toward him, acknowledging the emotional weight of memory and the gentle courage it took to dwell there without fear. Even in dreams, he realized, connection endured. Absence did not erase the impact of presence. The lost were still with him, woven into the patterns of thought, reflection, and quiet care. Morty thought of Summer, Beth, and Jerry, of the countless ways each had touched his life in small, subtle gestures. Even arguments, misunderstandings, or moments of tension carried meaning, contributing to the complex tapestry of relationships. The dreams of what was lost were not just about people or events. They were about awareness, attention, and the enduring traces of emotional presence. Morty understood that memory and care were inseparable, like light bending through glass, fragile, yet endlessly refracting significance. Rick's gaze softened as he observed Morty, sensing the quiet contemplation unfolding. "You can't hold on to everything," Rick whispered. "But you can notice it, learn from it, let it shape you gently." Morty nodded, letting the words settle, feeling a soft exhale in his chest, as if the room itself had released a weight. The dreams of what was lost were a balm, a subtle guide through the murmur of memory and reflection, illuminating the unseen threads of influence, love, and attention. Morty imagined a gentle river flowing through the room, carrying away the sharp edges of regret and filling the space with soft, luminescent reflections. Faces, voices, and moments drifted along its surface, sometimes clear, sometimes blurred, each contributing to the quiet continuity of life. Even those whom he would never see again were present in these reflections, shaping understanding and deepening empathy. Morty realized that this soft reflection, this gentle encounter with loss, was a form of emotional courage, quietly practiced in the stillness of night. The invisible friend hovered faintly at the edge of perception, drifting through shadows and light, acknowledging Morty's thoughts without intrusion. It was as if the universe itself was participating in his reflection, offering attention, patience, and gentle resonance. Morty felt the threads of care, memory, and subtle guidance intertwine around him, a quiet web of connection, linking past, present, and imagined futures. The dreams of what was lost were never truly empty. They were spaces for presence, reflection, and awareness. Morty exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of accumulated memory soften into calm. He allowed the quiet rhythm of thought, presence, and emotional reflection to carry him forward. Even in absence, there was care. Even in loss, there was enduring presence. The night held him gently, Rick beside him, the house alive with subtle echoes and soft hums, and the universe outside bending light in acknowledgement. And as Morty's eyelids grew heavy, he felt a deep, quiet understanding settle within him, that even dreams of what was lost were invitations to notice, reflect, and honor the invisible threads of care that persist across time and space. The lost were still present, quietly shaping the heart, guiding thought, and whispering lessons in resilience, empathy, and gentle awareness. The morning sky hung soft and pale, dotted with clouds that seemed to move slower than usual, drifting with deliberate grace above the Smith house. Morty stood on the porch, his hands resting lightly on the railing, watching the gentle procession of white and gray. There was a strange familiarity in their shapes, a kind of quiet memory etched into the folds of vapor. Each cloud seemed to carry fragments of yesterday, whispers of laughter, echoes of words spoken long ago, and hints of dreams that had lingered in the spaces between. Morty breathed in deeply, feeling the crisp air fill his lungs, and he noticed how the clouds mirrored the subtle rhythms of life inside the house. The sky itself seemed to remember the small gestures, the quiet acts of care, the invisible threads that connected family, friends, and moments across time. There was no urgency in the movement above, only the patient unfolding of shapes and light, as if the clouds themselves were archivists of emotion and memory. Rick appeared beside him, leaning on the railing, with a hand resting lightly on Morty's shoulder. "Ever notice," Rick said softly, voice low and contemplative, "how clouds remember? Not in a thinking way, Morty. More like they carry the past gently along, holding it there so you can see it if you look closely." Morty nodded, watching a cluster of clouds drift apart slowly, their edges illuminated by the morning sun. He felt the truth in Rick's words, a soft, almost imperceptible presence in the sky, carrying remnants of the world below. Morty's mind wandered to moments that had passed in the house over the past few days. Laughter echoing through the living room, faint sounds of tinkering in the garage, the hush of quiet reflection after small acts of courage. Each memory seemed suspended in the air, caught and held as the clouds carried their weight across the sky. Morty realized that even fleeting instances of care, subtle words, or unremarked kindness were preserved in ways that outlasted the immediate moment. Like soft imprints pressed into time, Rick's eyes followed a thin wisp stretching toward the horizon. They remember us, Morty. They remember the echoes, the threads of care, even the things we think we've forgotten. They're not just clouds. They're like soft mirrors of all the quiet life around us. Morty smiled faintly, thinking of invisible friends, subtle presences, and the intrusions that had shaped reflection in recent days. The clouds, in their slow drift, seemed to affirm that even unnoticed actions carried lasting significance. Morty leaned against the railing, feeling the gentle warmth of the sun mixed with the soft brush of wind. He imagined that each cloud was a keeper of moments, holding laughter, patience, and love within its form. Even mistakes, awkward gestures, and words left unsaid seemed to float quietly among them, transformed into gentle reminders of experience, connection, and growth. Morty felt a kind of calm settle over him, a realization that memory was not static, but alive, drifting in the spaces between effort and attention. He thought of Summer and Beth, imagining the threads of care they had woven into the household's subtle gestures, unspoken understanding, and acts of quiet kindness. The clouds, he felt, were carriers of these threads, reflecting the persistence of connection across time and space. Even Jerry's fumbling attempts at participation seemed to ripple gently through the sky, leaving soft traces in the drifting shapes. Morty realized that all acts, no matter how small or overlooked, contributed to the larger fabric of memory and emotional resonance. Rick adjusted a small device in his hand, a faint pulse of light blending with the shifting sunlight. You ever think about how we leave little fingerprints on everything? Rick asked quietly. Not physical prints, emotional, subtle. They linger. Clouds, shadows, laughter. All those tiny things stay. That's how you remember life. Morty considered the words, feeling the pulse of presence in the household, in the threads of care, and in the drifting clouds above. Memory, he realized, was a living, breathing companion, carrying with it both lessons and comfort. Morty watched as the clouds slowly shifted, forming shapes that seemed familiar, yet unplaceable faces of friends long gone, fleeting creatures encountered on strange adventures, the gentle arch of a hallway he had walked down countless times. The clouds held the past softly, without judgment or urgency, allowing him to feel the depth of experience without the sharp edges of regret. It was a gentle meditation on time, memory, and the enduring presence of care. The wind shifted, carrying a faint rustle of leaves, the subtle vibration of life moving through the Smith property. Morty felt the clouds respond almost imperceptibly, bending light and shape in quiet acknowledgement. He realized that these aerial memories were not passive. They interacted with the world below, harmonizing with actions, presence, and the invisible threads that connected everything. The clouds that remembered were partners in reflection, witnesses to courage, attention, and quiet connection. Morty closed his eyes briefly, letting the rhythm of the sky, the faint hum of the household, and Rick's steady presence settle around him. He felt the weight of memory ease, replaced by a gentle understanding that life's significance was not always loud or immediate. It existed in subtle echoes, in clouds drifting across the sky, in threads of care left quietly in bedrooms, living rooms, and hallways. Morty understood that attention and presence were acts of courage, a reminder that even fleeting moments could endure through reflection and care. Rick placed a hand on Morty's shoulder. One last time, a soft, grounding touch. Clouds remember, Morty. So do you. And that's what matters. Morty nodded, feeling the calm certainty of the moment settle within him. The clouds drifted on, slow and deliberate, carrying echoes of past joys, lessons learned, and the quiet courage of choices made. Morty watched them for a long while, letting the gentle movement soothe him, wrapping the morning in quiet reflection, gratitude, and soft wonder. And as Morty stepped back inside, letting the warmth of the house embrace him, he carried the drifting, remembering clouds in his mind, a quiet companion for thought, care, and reflection. The threads of memory, attention, and presence followed him gently, shaping the day, the household, and his awareness with subtle, enduring resonance. The living room was bathed in amber light, soft and golden, spilling from the setting sun through the half-open curtains. Dust particles floated lazily, catching the warm glow, suspended like tiny stars in a quiet universe of their own. Morty sat in the center of the couch, hands folded loosely in his lap, absorbing the soft hush of the house. The warmth of the light seemed to carry a weight of reflection, an invitation to notice the subtle layers of the day and the moments that had shaped it. Rick sat nearby, hunched over a small device emitting faint pulses of green light, each pulse harmonizing with the gentle shifts of the room. Morty watched him quietly, noting the lines of focus around Rick's eyes, softened by the calm of late afternoon. There was a rare serenity in this moment, an unspoken acknowledgement that reflection mattered as much as invention, that presence mattered as much as adventure. Morty understood that these quiet hours were themselves acts of care, threads woven into the fabric of connection. Morty's eyes drifted toward the corner of the room where the shadows were longest. The familiar shapes of furniture and objects seemed transformed, softened, and elongated by the amber light. He could almost see faint traces of past conversations, small gestures, laughter that had echoed here days before. It was as if the room itself remembered the subtle rhythms of care and attention left behind in the everyday motions of life. Morty felt the gentle pull of nostalgia, a soft longing for the quiet ways moments passed, quietly shaping him and everyone he cared for. Rick hummed softly, a gentle undertone to the room's ambience. Morty noticed that each pulse of the device matched the cadence of that hum, creating an almost imperceptible rhythm, a soft heartbeat that connected him to the room, to Rick, and to the ongoing tapestry of memory. "Reflection isn't about the big stuff, Morty," Rick murmured, eyes still on the device. "It's these little things, the flicker of light, a whispered word, a shadow falling just so it reminds us who we are and what we care about." Morty nodded, feeling the truth of the words resonate softly in his chest. The amber light shifted slightly as the sun dipped lower, brushing the room with deeper tones of orange and gold. Morty leaned back, letting the glow wash over him, noticing the intricate details of the furniture, the faint imprint of footsteps in the carpet, the tiny marks on the walls where life had brushed against the home. Every trace, he realized, carried meaning. Even the unnoticed moments, small gestures, and quiet presence left soft imprints that shaped connection, memory, and understanding. Morty thought of Summer and Beth, picturing them moving through the house in their own quiet ways. Each gesture they had made, Summer's laughter echoing softly down the hallway, Beth's patient encouragement, Jerry's gentle attempts at participation, wove into the fabric of the household like invisible threads. The amber light seemed to honor these threads, reflecting them in warmth and soft shadow. Morty felt a swell of gratitude for their presence, for the small acts of care that often went unseen yet created profound resonance. Rick's device hummed a slightly different note, a soft variation that felt almost conversational. Morty realized that reflection itself was a dynamic process, a gentle dialogue between past and present, observation and understanding. Each pulse, each shift of light became a marker of awareness, a subtle encouragement to notice, honor, and engage with the quiet patterns that made life meaningful. The amber light, the humming, and the shadows together formed a lullaby of presence and attention. Morty imagined the room as a living archive of experience. Each corner, each shadow, each glint of light holding layers of thought, care, and memory. Even moments of disagreement or tension left delicate traces, soft impressions of growth, understanding, and emotional resilience. He realized that reflection in amber light was more than looking back. It was honoring what remained, what had endured, and what continued to shape the heart quietly and persistently. Rick's gaze lifted from the device, meeting Morty's eyes briefly. There was no rush, no need for words, just acknowledgement. A quiet affirmation that understanding and care often flourished in observation and reflection rather than dramatic action. Morty felt a deep calm settle over him, a recognition that these hours of soft contemplation were themselves as vital as any adventure. Through strange worlds or chaotic times, Morty allowed his mind to wander, letting the amber light guide him through memories of laughter, quiet conversations, and shared understanding. Each recollection was a thread, interwoven with light and shadow, vibrating gently in the warm atmosphere. He felt the presence of the invisible threads of care, attention, and connection, and realized that reflection was the act of noticing these threads, understanding their persistence, and letting them guide one gently forward. The sun slipped lower, casting long golden fingers across the room, and Morty felt the weight of reflection lighten into calm. Shadows lengthened and blended with pools of light, carrying the quiet rhythm of the day toward evening. Morty understood that reflection was not just about what had been lost or gained, but about the enduring presence of subtle gestures, attentive observation, and shared quiet. The amber light was a soft mirror, revealing the enduring patterns of care woven through life, connection, and experience. As the day faded into the first hints of twilight, Morty sank back into the couch, letting the warm glow and quiet hum of the device wrap around him. He felt the threads of care, attention, and reflection intertwine with the soft light, guiding him toward calm, awareness, and gentle wonder. The amber light seemed to hold the room in a soft embrace, a reminder that even fleeting moments could leave lasting impressions, and that reflection itself was a form of quiet, enduring presence. And as the shadows deepened and the last rays of sunlight dissolved into the night, Morty felt the soft reassurance that even in the quietest hours, connection, care, and reflection persisted. The amber light lingered in memory, a gentle companion for thought, calm, and understanding, guiding him toward the gentle rhythm of evening and the comfort of presence, both seen and unseen. The afternoon settled softly over the Smith household, and Morty found himself standing at the edge of the garage, watching Rick work. The usual clatter of tools and faint hum of devices seemed quieter today, measured, deliberate. There was a rhythm to Rick's movements, a careful stretching of attention across the machines, the scattered blueprints, and the small, unremarkable objects that somehow held meaning. Morty felt a subtle tug within himself, a desire to stretch not his limbs, but his mind, his heart, his understanding. Rick glanced up briefly, noticing Morty's gaze. "It's not always about fixing the machines, Morty," Rick said, voice low and calm. "Sometimes the real work is stretching yourself, reaching beyond what's comfortable, beyond what's obvious. Understanding? That's a muscle too." Morty nodded, letting the words sink in. He realized that growth often came quietly, through patient effort, observation, and the willingness to notice not just actions, but intentions, motivations, and the soft patterns that guided people's choices. Morty walked slowly around the garage, his attention drawn to small details, the faint scratches on a metal panel, the gentle bend of a wire, the subtle shimmer of light reflecting off a curved surface. Each detail seemed to carry a story, a soft imprint of thought, care, and consideration. Understanding, he realized, required noticing these things, the small, easily overlooked gestures that spoke louder than words. It was a stretch, yes, a careful expansion of attention, patience, and empathy, but one that could shape perception profoundly. Rick adjusted a small device on the workbench, the glow of its light pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Morty watched the motion, feeling a rhythm in the subtle stretch of attention that connected Rick, the tools, and the quiet energy of the garage. The stretch toward understanding, Morty realized, was both internal and external. It was the willingness to bend perception gently toward curiosity, patience, and reflection, to let subtle truths emerge from the ordinary hum of life. Morty's mind drifted to family, to moments of tension, laughter, and care. Summer's soft guidance, Beth's quiet patience, Jerry's earnest attempts, all had taught lessons in empathy, connection, and understanding. Even moments of misunderstanding, disagreement, or fear carried meaning, offering opportunities to stretch beyond immediate reactions and into awareness. Morty recognized that understanding was not a destination, but a gentle journey, a continuous expansion of perception shaped by attention, care, and patience. Rick spoke again, softly, almost to himself. Stretch too far and you might fall, Morty. Stretch too little and you never grow. It's in the balance, in noticing the resistance, feeling it, and keeping steady. Morty felt the resonance of the words deep within him. The stretch toward understanding required courage, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet bravery of confronting the unfamiliar, the subtle, and the unseen. It required presence, reflection, and a willingness to let patience guide thought and action. Morty moved closer to the workbench, observing the intricate interplay of components, noting the care with which Rick had arranged each piece. He thought about the invisible threads of influence, the unspoken gestures of care, and the subtle lessons embedded in the ordinary moments of life. Each of these elements required a gentle stretch of perception to notice, an expansion of attention that allowed understanding to grow. Morty felt a calm certainty settle over him, realizing that the act of noticing itself was transformative. The garage seemed to pulse with quiet energy, every object and shadow vibrating softly with subtle significance. Morty felt the threads of connection intertwine with this energy, linking him to Rick, the family, and the quiet rhythm of the household. Stretching toward understanding, he realized, was about aligning with these threads, observing them, reflecting upon them, and letting them guide thought and choice without urgency or expectation. It was a gentle, patient form of courage, unfolding in small, deliberate steps. Morty's gaze shifted to the corner where Rick had left a small, half-finished device. The complexity of its design was softened by the subtle imperfections of hand, attention, and intention. Morty noticed the care in the bends, the gentle arcs, the soft hum of a machine in harmony with its surroundings. Understanding, he realized, required noticing these imperfect yet meaningful details, learning to see both function and intention. Rick glanced up, sensing Morty's reflection. Understanding isn't about knowing everything, Morty. It's about feeling it, noticing it, letting it stretch you in ways that are quiet but lasting. Morty nodded, feeling a soft exhale ripple through him. The stretch toward understanding was not linear, not easily measured, but deeply transformative in its gentle insistence. It was an expansion of attention, awareness, and empathy that shaped perception and anchored presence in the quiet fabric of life. Morty took a deep breath, letting the warm light of the garage, the soft hum of machinery, and the quiet presence of Rick guide him. He felt the subtle threads of care, observation, and reflection weave around him, expanding his understanding not through force or urgency, but through patience, attention, and gentle courage. The stretch was ongoing, unending, but profoundly calming, grounding, and illuminating Got as the afternoon waned, the shadows lengthened, casting long shapes across the garage floor. Morty felt the stretch settle into a quiet rhythm, a gentle expansion of thought and awareness. The threads of care, the subtle lessons of observation, and the enduring presence of those he loved intertwined, guiding him toward calm reflection and a soft understanding that would stay with him long after the day ended. And in that quiet space, amidst tools, hums, shadows, and light, Morty felt the satisfaction of gentle growth. The stretch toward understanding was not flashy or dramatic. It was soft, deliberate, and deeply resonant, shaping perception, nurturing connection, and guiding him toward calm reflection, patience, and enduring awareness. The evening draped itself gently over the Smith household, settling with a hush that felt like a soft embrace. Morty lay on the couch, legs tucked beneath him, staring at the faint reflections of streetlights on the living room walls. Shadows and light intertwined in patterns both familiar and strange, creating a quiet rhythm that seemed to pulse with the echoes of the day. It was a space where dreams and reality overlapped, soft and porous, like a membrane letting one world bleed gently into the other. Morty's thoughts drifted, recalling fleeting visions from sleep dreams that seemed to carry fragments of memory, fragments of hope, and fragments of unresolved questions. Some were vivid, almost tangible, while others lingered like smoke, teasing the edges of consciousness. And yet these dreams were not confusing or frightening. They were gentle invitations to notice, to reflect, and to engage with the threads of presence and care woven into the ordinary fabric of life. Rick appeared at the doorway, silhouetted against the fading glow of the sky. Morty noticed the faint softness around his posture, the rare absence of urgency in his movements. "Dreams," Rick murmured, settling into a chair across from Morty, "have a way of telling you things reality doesn't always show. They remind you of what matters, of what's persistent beneath the noise." Morty nodded, sensing the quiet truth of those words. Reality and dreams, he realized, were not opposing forces, but partners in reflection, guiding thought and attention gently toward awareness. Morty's gaze fell on the corner, where the invisible threads of recent days, the subtle presences, the quiet intrusions, the unnoticed gestures, had left their soft imprints. Even the strange parasites that had infiltrated memory now seemed distant, rendered harmless by attention, observation, and care. The line between dream and waking perception blurred, creating a gentle continuum where insight, awareness, and presence intertwined seamlessly. Morty realized that understanding, like dreams, often emerged quietly, in small, subtle ways, rather than through dramatic revelation. The room seemed to pulse with a gentle rhythm, harmonizing the hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of the floorboards, and the soft, steady presence of Rick beside him. Morty felt the subtle resonance of connection, the invisible threads that linked him to Rick, Summer, Beth, and even Jerry. Each thread carried a quiet, persistent energy, like a heartbeat in the spaces between thought and action, memory and observation. In this convergence, dreams and reality coexisted, affirming the quiet significance of attention, care, and reflection. Morty allowed his thoughts to wander to the lessons embedded in recent days, the intrusions noticed and managed, the small acts of courage, and the soft ways understanding had expanded. Even moments of uncertainty and fear had left gentle traces of growth, resilience, and subtle awareness. Dreams and reality intertwined in these reflections, merging the imagined and the lived into a harmonious whole that invited quiet contemplation and gentle insight. Rick hummed softly, a faint undertone of energy that blended with the room. "Reality's not always clear, Morty," he said. "Sometimes it's best understood in fragments, glimpses, echoes. Dreams just fill in the spaces, giving context to what's been overlooked." Morty leaned back, letting the words settle, feeling a soft exhale ripple through him. The connection between the conscious and the subconscious, the waking and the sleeping, became a delicate guide through which understanding and empathy could grow steadily and quietly. Light shifted as night deepened, the faint glow from outside blending with the warm amber reflections in the room. Morty pictured the threads of care, patience, and subtle attention extending outward, connecting all the moments, memories, and presences he had noticed. Each acted as a bridge, linking the ephemeral nature of dreams to the tangible world, a gentle affirmation that understanding, empathy, and connection were not fleeting but enduring. Morty thought of the family, the laughter of Summer, the quiet guidance of Beth, the earnest gestures of Jerry. Each carried its own weight in the continuum of dreams and reality. He recognized the persistence of care, the subtle but meaningful actions that shaped perception, guided understanding, and anchored presence. Dreams and reality did not compete. They collaborated in this delicate interplay, teaching him to honor the unseen as much as the seen. Rick adjusted the device on the table, its soft pulses mirroring the subtle rhythms of the room. Morty watched, noticing the alignment of light, shadow, and motion. Even the smallest adjustments, the bend of a wire, the angle of a reflective surface, echoed the broader truth he had come to understand, that life's significance lay in noticing, observing, and allowing understanding to grow through subtle, patient awareness. Dreams were part of this, as real as waking actions, as important as quiet reflection, and just as deserving of attention. The room grew quieter still, the boundaries between dream and reality softening further. Morty felt a calm certainty settle within him. Attention, care, observation, these were the anchors, the invisible threads, the soft hum guiding him through both sleep and wakefulness. Dreams did not merely escape reality. They conversed with it, revealing insights, nurturing patience, and deepening the quiet courage needed to navigate uncertainty with empathy and awareness. Morty's eyelids grew heavy, the hum of the household blending with the rhythm of his thoughts. He pictured the invisible threads extending outward, carrying dreams gently into reality, and reality softly into dreams, creating a continuum of presence, care, and reflection. The world, he realized, was a soft, living tapestry, where even subtle actions, unnoticed gestures, and quiet reflections left lasting impressions, echoing through both waking life and the gentle spaces of the subconscious dot. As Morty drifted toward sleep, Rick's quiet presence beside him offered reassurance and continuity. The threads of care, attention, and understanding stretched through the house, intertwining the real and imagined, the conscious and subconscious. Morty felt held by this gentle continuum, embraced by the interplay of dreams and reality, and guided toward calm reflection and quiet insight. And as the night deepened, Morty allowed himself to surrender to the soft rhythm of awareness and imagination, knowing that the threads connecting him to those he loved, to lessons learned, and to subtle truths discovered would persist quietly and steadfastly. In this gentle merging of dreams and reality, understanding had space to grow, and the heart was calm, attentive, and at peace. The night settled over the Smith household with a soft sigh, the kind that carries itself slowly through corridors, across furniture, and into the small spaces where memories linger. Morty sat on the couch, knees drawn close, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the floorboards, and the distant, gentle rustle of leaves outside. It was a lullaby composed not of music, but of subtle, familiar sounds, the quiet reminders of home, of continuity, and of presence. Rick emerged from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag, a faint smile touching his lips. "Time to rest, Morty," he murmured softly, the words more suggestion than command. There was a calmness in his voice, the rare absence of urgency or force, the quiet acknowledgement that some farewells were gentle, unhurried, and entirely necessary. Morty felt the subtle weight of the day ease from his chest, replaced by the gentle rhythm of preparation, closure, and reflection. The room was bathed in a soft, golden glow from the nightlight in the corner, casting elongated shadows across walls and furniture. Morty thought of the past few days, the invisible intruders, the moments of tension, the laughter, the quiet care. All of it coalesced in this space, forming an emotional tapestry woven from experience, presence, and subtle understanding. The lullaby of goodbye was not a sorrowful song. It was an acknowledgment of impermanence. Morty reflected on the invisible threads of connection that had persisted even through disruption. Summer's laughter, Beth's quiet guidance, Jerry's well-meaning gestures, and Rick's patient mentorship. They were all threads woven into the fabric of family, interlacing with moments of joy, confusion, and insight. These threads, Morty realized, could not be severed by absence or change. They persisted in quiet reflection, in gentle thought, and in the soft acknowledgement of care. Rick hummed a low, almost imperceptible tune, a pattern of sound that seemed to stretch through the room, brushing gently against walls, furniture, and memory. Morty listened, letting the vibration carry him into reflection. It was a lullaby not just for sleep, but for understanding, for presence, and for the quiet acceptance of endings that were soft rather than dramatic. In this gentle sound, he recognized the persistence of care, the subtlety of influence, and the calm assurance that love could endure without fanfare. Morty's gaze drifted toward the window, where the faint shimmer of stars peeked through the curtains. Each tiny light seemed to wink in acknowledgement, like witnesses to the day's events, bearing silent testimony to growth, courage, and understanding. The lullaby of goodbye was mirrored in this gentle cosmos, a quiet reminder that endings were not erasures, but soft continuations, leaving traces that could be revisited in thought, memory, and gentle reflection. The invisible friend lingered faintly at the periphery, a soft presence that acknowledged the transition without intrusion. Morty felt the comfort of continuity, the reassurance that even as some moments concluded, others would persist in subtle ways. Each memory, each lesson, each act of care became a note in this ongoing lullaby, a gentle composition woven from experience, reflection, and empathy. Morty realized that farewells need not carry sharp edges. They could be soft, poetic, and comforting. Rick's hand rested lightly on Morty's shoulder, a grounding presence amidst the soft shadows. "Goodbyes don't mean it's over, Morty," Rick murmured, voice steady and low. "They're just changing forms. Threads shift, rhythms adjust, but the essence that doesn't go away." Morty nodded slowly, feeling a deep, gentle resonance in his chest. The lullaby of goodbye was not sadness. It was awareness, presence, and subtle continuity, a quiet celebration of what had been and what would remain in memory and heart. Morty thought of all the moments that had seemed insignificant at the time, a glance shared, a small gesture of kindness, a soft word of reassurance. Each of these had persisted in ways he hadn't noticed, shaping understanding, deepening empathy, and providing quiet comfort. The lullaby of goodbye was composed of these small elements, a mosaic of care and presence that lingered even when activity ceased, even when doors closed, even when figures faded from view. The hum of the household, the soft glow of light, and the presence of Rick and the invisible threads all converged in Morty's awareness. The lullaby of goodbye was not something external. It was internal, a soft, reflective process that honored the day, the family, and the gentle lessons embedded in ordinary experience. Morty felt his thoughts slow, his heart soften, and a quiet calm settled over him. He realized that this lullaby could be carried into sleep, into dreams, and into future reflection. A gentle echo of care and understanding. Rick rose slowly, moving toward the garage for the last time that evening. Morty watched him go, feeling a tender mixture of gratitude, reflection, and calm acceptance. Even in departure, Rick's presence lingered the subtle patterns of care. Guidance and mentorship stretched across the household like invisible threads, soft but enduring. Morty exhaled slowly, letting the hush of the house, the warmth of light, and the quiet echoes of connection cradle him gently. And as Morty's eyes grew heavy, he allowed the lullaby of goodbye to guide him into rest. It was soft, reflective, and persistent, a gentle weaving of presence, memory, and love that would endure beyond the night. In the quiet, Morty felt the reassurance that endings were gentle, that threads of care persisted, and that even as moments concluded, their echoes would continue to shape understanding, reflection, and the heart. And somewhere, beyond the shadows, the threads, and the glow of light, Rick's presence remained quiet, steady, and soft and enduring companion in the rhythm of life. The night stretched over the Smith household, quiet and expansive, like a soft blanket draped over everything familiar. Morty sat by the window, watching the faint glimmer of stars scatter across the sky. Their light seemed gentle, patient, almost knowing, as if the universe itself carried a memory of every small act, every quiet gesture, every moment of care that had been given or received. He felt the calm weight of continuity settle around him, a reassurance that even in absence, presence persisted. Rick's chair was empty in the living room, the faint hum of the garage distant, but not gone. Morty imagined him somewhere out there, wandering across strange worlds, tinkering with improbable machines, perhaps humming the same soft tune that had always accompanied his quiet moments of reflection. Rick had gone before, and he would go again, but the essence of him, the threads of care, attention, and understanding he had left behind, remained woven through the household, invisible yet undeniably present. Morty leaned against the window frame, thinking about the way Rick had quietly shaped his perspective over time. Lessons hadn't always been explicit. Many were subtle, often folded into everyday moments. The patient encouragement to notice, to stretch understanding, to recognize the value of small acts of courage, they lingered in thought, memory, and quiet reflection. Even when Rick was absent, Morty could feel the hum of that guidance in the spaces around him, like a low-frequency resonance only perceptible to those who truly paid attention. Outside, the wind whispered softly, rustling the leaves, carrying with it a faint scent of damp earth and distant adventures. Morty closed his eyes briefly, allowing the sound and the memories to settle together. He imagined Rick, somewhere under a foreign sky, pausing to watch clouds drift, to adjust a mechanism with precise, careful hands, or to hum quietly as he considered a small detail no one else might notice. That sense of presence, even from afar, was comforting, an invisible tether connecting Morty to the person who had been both teacher and companion. Enigmatic yet familiar, Morty's thoughts wandered to the subtle ways Rick had impacted the family. Small gestures of care, rare moments of vulnerability, hints of understanding, all had left impressions, quiet but enduring. Morty realized that presence was not measured by proximity, but by impact, by the threads left in others' hearts, the invisible resonance of attention and care. Even in absence, Rick's influence persisted, like a soft echo in a long corridor, subtle but undeniably real. The stars outside shifted imperceptibly, and Morty imagined them as markers of passage, silent witnesses to the continuity of moments, of lessons, of quiet courage. He thought of all the threads that bound his family together: Summer's laughter, Beth's patience, Jerry's earnest attempts, and his own growing awareness of subtlety and care. Rick's presence, though absent, was woven into these threads, a quiet affirmation of connection, persistence, and understanding. Morty's breathing slowed as he reflected on the day, the nights before, and the gentle progression of experiences that had shaped him. He thought of moments of fear, laughter, discovery, and reflection, all held together by subtle threads of guidance, attention, and empathy. Somewhere, Rick was out there, continuing his own journey. But the echoes of his presence had already taken root within Morty, allowing understanding, patience, and quiet courage to grow. The room around Morty seemed to pulse gently with the quiet energy of continuity. Faint hum of electronics, the shadows shifting in soft light, and the ambient resonance of the household. Morty realized that this was what presence truly meant. A quiet, enduring impact that could stretch beyond physical space and temporal limitations. Even when unseen, even when distant, influence persisted, soft but undeniable, shaping perception, thought, and heart. Morty imagined Rick pausing briefly in some distant place, looking at an alien sky or a familiar constellation, humming softly, and feeling a quiet tether linking him to home. That tether, fragile and subtle as it seemed, carried the weight of love, understanding, and presence. Morty felt comforted knowing that the threads they had shared were resilient, woven into the spaces between thought, reflection, and memory. Enduring even across distance and time, Dottie thought about the invisible intrusions, the strange distortions of memory, and the moments of uncertainty that had occurred in the past weeks. All of them had passed, resolved through awareness, care, and presence. And now, in the calm of night, Morty could see how each event, each moment of attention, had contributed to the quiet foundation of understanding, trust, and emotional resilience that sustained him, the family, and even Rick himself. Morty exhaled slowly, feeling a gentle warmth spread through him. Somewhere, Rick was still out there, following a path that intertwined with the world in strange and unpredictable ways. Yet his influence remained anchored here, soft but persistent, guiding reflection, growth, and care. Morty understood that absence was not emptiness. It was another form of presence, a quiet continuation of influence, a gentle reminder that threads of connection stretched far beyond immediate visibility. The night deepened, stars shifting slowly across the sky, and Morty felt a serene calm envelop him. He allowed the awareness of Rick's distant presence, the threads of care within the household, and the quiet rhythm of reflection to settle fully within him. Somewhere, Rick continued his adventures, humming softly, tinkering gently, stretching understanding in his own ways, but Morty carried the resonance of those actions, soft and enduring, in his heart. And as the night pulsed gently on, Morty allowed himself to drift toward sleep, held by the knowledge that presence, care, and understanding were not confined to the here and now. They stretched beyond space and time, woven into the quiet tapestry of thought, memory, and heart. Somewhere, Rick was still out there, and here, Morty felt the comforting weight of his presence, soft, persistent, and infinitely gentle. The house was quiet now, settled under the velvet sweep of night. The hum of distant machinery and the faint rustle of wind through the trees blending into a gentle lullaby. Morty lay on the couch, arms tucked beneath him, eyes half closed, letting the calm of the evening wash over every thought and memory. The day's events had dissolved into soft reflections, threads of care, small acts of understanding, and quiet presence that lingered like the faint glow of stars in a darkened sky. Rick sat nearby, his posture relaxed, his eyes reflecting the muted amber of a nightlight. For once, there was no rush, no tinkering, no sharp exclamations or sudden explosions of thought. Just the quiet, meditative presence of someone who had lived through chaos and discovery, who now allowed himself to simply be, acknowledging the world with a calm gaze and soft, steady breathing. Morty felt the same calm settle into him, a gentle weight of reassurance that even in endings, presence endured. The invisible threads of recent days, the laughter, the lessons, the soft intrusions, and the quiet reconciliations, woven subtly into the household, vibrated softly in the air around them. Morty let himself notice them fully, tracing their paths in thought, feeling the warmth of connection that had been built through moments both extraordinary and ordinary. There was no urgency in observing them. They existed without demand, persistent and enduring, a testament to the quiet resilience of care. Morty's thoughts wandered to family. Summer's gentle teasing, Beth's unwavering attention, Jerry's earnest efforts. They were all strands in a web of subtle love and understanding, soft yet unbreakable. Rick's presence, though sometimes enigmatic and distant, had left its mark in careful observation, the quiet imparting of lessons, and the persistent hum of care threading through each interaction. Morty realized that this web of presence, attention, and reflection was the foundation of everything. A quiet reassurance that the world could be soft, connected, and meaningful. The room itself seemed to settle in response. Shadows grew long and delicate, stretching across walls and furniture, blending seamlessly with the soft glow of the nightlight. The interplay of light and shadow mirrored the subtle contours of thought, memory, and emotion. Morty noticed how the smallest details, faint marks on the carpet, the curve of a chair, the hum of electronics carried meaning when observed attentively, and how understanding often arose, not from dramatic acts, but from these subtle, persistent presences. Rick hummed softly, almost imperceptibly, and Morty felt the familiar reassurance that even the simplest sound could carry care, reflection, and connection. The lullaby of presence, threads of attention, and quiet understanding continued, not as noise, but as a guiding rhythm, easing thought, emotion, and memory into gentle alignment. Morty allowed himself to breathe with the cadence, feeling each inhale and exhale echo the soft lessons of patience, empathy, and awareness learned through strange adventures, and everyday observation alike. The quiet of night invited reflection. Morty remembered moments of laughter, moments of fear, moments of subtle courage and tender care. Each one was a note in the soft symphony of their household, a melody of connection and understanding that persisted beyond words, beyond immediate recognition. The lullaby of these moments was gentle, expansive, and enduring, the reminder that significance could be found not in spectacle, but in presence, attention, and thoughtful observation. Morty's gaze drifted toward the window. Outside, the stars shone faintly, distant yet constant, like witnesses to the rhythms of life within the house. They seemed to hold memory and presence in their soft light, a quiet echo of continuity and care. Somewhere beyond the walls, the world continued, but within this space, Morty felt the warm, encompassing reassurance that connection, understanding, and empathy persisted, stretching across time, space, and circumstance. Rick's chair creaked slightly as he shifted, his hand brushing against the table beside him. Morty noticed the tiny motion, the quiet attention to detail, and felt the enduring presence of care, even in small, almost imperceptible gestures. The world was vast, strange, and unpredictable, yet these subtle actions, the hum of a machine, the careful adjustment of a tool, a softly uttered word created a scaffold of calm, safety, and meaning. Morty understood that this was the real magic, the persistence of presence, and the quiet endurance of thoughtful connection. And now, as Morty's eyes grew heavier, and the hum of the household faded into the background of memory and awareness, he let himself surrender fully to the calm. The threads of care, understanding, and reflection, woven by Rick, Summer, Beth, and Jerry, held him gently, a soft network of reassurance and continuity. Somewhere beyond sight, Rick continued his adventures, persistent yet unseen, and here, Morty felt the echo of that presence in every shadow, every hum, and every memory. The night was complete, the soft loops of care and attention filling the space with gentle resonance. Morty felt a deep, unspoken gratitude for these moments, these threads, and these presences that made life quietly extraordinary. And as the calmness of night fully enveloped him, he thought the world could be vast and strange, but threads of understanding, love, and presence persisted, soft and enduring, like a lullaby carrying one into sleep. And so, with a soft exhale, Morty allowed himself to drift fully into rest, trusting that the threads of connection, the presence of those he loved, and the quiet lessons of care and reflection would follow him gently into dreams. Somewhere, Rick continued to stretch through his own adventures. And here, Morty felt the comforting resonance of his presence, soft, persistent, and infinitely reassuring. Thanks for spending this time with us. Sleep well. Everything's going to be okay, man.